to feel funny. He's the only one that wears a mask still.
All right.
All right.
Most of us are used to it.
I'll be sick in 3 days. You won't be.
It's okay.
Okay.
Okay, you're good to go.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I would like to make a motion to open the meeting.
Second.
How do you vote?
Aye.
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 Motion carries.
Okay. So for start, the conflict of interest disclosure, I'll start, and I'm going to recuse myself from the 75 Monroe application. Does anyone else have any conflict of interest to disclose?
I do not.
I do not.
I do not. I do not.
Okay, and my understanding is selection, there's going to be a subsequent discussion when the time is appropriate to select an acting chairperson to, in my absence. And also, is there a decision on who is serving, or having an alternate serving or not? I guess that'll come after, and then we get to that point of the meeting.
Yes.
So I'm not going to get involved with that. So other announcements. When is our next meeting?
July 2nd.
July 6th? Okay, so discussion on 42 Monroe Avenue is going to be, it's a site plan review. That's going to be deferred until our next meeting on July 6th. So that leaves the two items on our agenda is going to be 50 State Street, which we will start with. And then I will leave the proceedings and let the rest of the board discuss 75 Monroe LWRP review and site plan review.
Were we going to open the public hearing for 42 Monroe? I already sent everything out.
Mindy, this is just announcing that we're carrying it over sufficient?
It's sufficient to announce that you're carrying it over.
Okay.
We're not going to open the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so is there anybody here for 42 Monroe Avenue?
They had a situation where they can't be here, so that's why they were asking that to be held open.
I mean, sorry, 42, I'm sorry, 50 State Street.
50 State Street is online. He did not realize that it was a live meeting, so he signed in. Brian Meyer is online.
Okay, all right, so here's the proceedings. We're gonna have a public hearing on this. So what we're gonna start with is letting the applicant give us an overview of their proposal. And then we are going to open the public hearing. And the public, if they're online, they can comment. If they're in person, they can comment. If they're online, there's two ways that you can submit a question and ask to speak. One is to click the raise hand button on the screen. So if you click the raise hand button, we can allow you to speak. If you would prefer to type a question, there's a Q&A section, and you can type the question and our secretary will read it to us. So with that said, we're going to start with 50 State here, Copperleaf Brewing Company, give them a chance to present their proposal. The board will ask them some questions if we have any, and then we'll take comments from the public. So do we have a way to hear the online person? Go ahead and elevate them to speak.
Can you hear me?
Brian?
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Brian, can you hear us?
I can hear you, but I don't know that you can hear me. I've unmuted. Is their laptop muted there?
No, we're good. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Brian Meyer. I'm one of the owners of Copperleaf Brewing. We're at 50 State Street, Building G in Northfield Common. We've been in business now for a little over a year. And we've had multiple requests throughout that year from many of our patrons asking if we have outdoor seating, when we'll have outdoor seating. So we made the decision to submit an application for some seating at the front of the building. We are, according to the SLA, required to have, if we have outdoor seating, it must be contiguous to the ingress egress to the building, which is the front of it. Currently, that is a fire lane. And as I understand it, that information of being a fire lane and being a possible, being able to use it has been reviewed and approved by the fire chief. So our proposal is that the other thing with that, we understand because it's a fire lane, anything we place there must be moved at the end of service or if there's an emergency. So whatever we put out there has to be easily moved in both scenarios. So we had initially submitted paperwork of saying tables and chairs out there, 4 tables and with 2 chairs at each. But in reconsidering that with that requirement of having to be able to move those out at the end of service or quickly, we've changed that, and you'll see in one of the other forms that we submitted that we're proposing doing 4 folding Adirondack style chairs in the front. And along with that, for security, safety purposes, and again, for ease of movement, putting out some stanchions with some type of chaining roping to mark off the area during service, and then pull those back in along with the folding chairs at the end of service.
So quick question, quick clarification. You're going to have no tables, and all you install is chairs and some temporary fencing.
Correct. We're with the Adirondack style chairs, what we would do is use, we would certainly be using plastic cups rather than the glassware that we have, and attaching a cup holder onto the chair for customers to use to hold their cup.
And you have 8 chairs listed in
Yes.
the revised application, because I think you just mentioned 4, but so you're seeking approval for up to 8 chairs, correct?
Yes, rather than the tables and chairs combination, we would use the 4 chairs on either side of the door, or whatever would fit according to having 8 chairs.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for the applicant so far to what they're doing?
Brian, at some point you mentioned shading. Are you still going to have that?
That is something that we're talking about. We understand that any type of a shading like a roll awning is a possibility, but that's a separate permit and must go before the architectural board. So that's not included in this particular application.
Okay.
Just one other thing I'll mention, just from a business perspective, what we're finding is another, because of the request is a big part of, from our customers, a big part of why we want to do some outdoor seating. But I will say from a business experience perspective, we do notice that in the very nice weather days, we tend to have less patrons. It seems as though people like to be sitting outside when the weather's nice, so they will seek out places, and people will call and ask us if we have outdoor seating on those nice days, and of course we have to say we don't. So we are losing potential business by not having it.
Okay, and so other clarification from you is you want to have this permit start tomorrow. This is a temporary permit for outdoor seating for this season only. So it's going to start as of tomorrow, if this is approved, and it would run through the end of October. And your times, track down your times here that you had requested. You had Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. to 9 p.m., Friday and Saturday, noon to 10 p.m., and Sunday, noon to 8 p.m. You normally, if we approve these things, normally we give you a little bit of setup and takedown time. But since this is a fire lane, you really have to be pretty strict about removing things after the activity. So I presume it wouldn't be an issue to have everything removed, say, half an hour after the activity completes, right?
That would be the idea, again, why we're reducing the number of items that we would need to be moving.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and hear comments from the public. I'll go ahead and make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
How do you vote?
Yes?
Aye?
Yes, aye.
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 Motion carries.
Okay. So do we have anyone looking to comment? Now, again, in person, people can raise their hand in the room and ask to speak. Or if anyone is online, you can click the raise hand button or type a comment in the Q&A section on the website. Okay, go ahead. So go ahead and please stand up, state your name and address for the record, and then your comments. Thank you.
Bruce Hummel, I live at 20 Grove Street. I'm here to voice my support for this proposal. Just using the village almost daily, there's multiple businesses that have outdoor seating, far greater than what this request is for. And I think it's a benefit to the community and to the residents, and I don't see any reasons why it should be approved.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Does anyone else in the room have comments? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Lynn Cole. I live at 66 State Street, and I also wanted to voice my support for this proposal. It's a great business, and I would also appreciate outdoor seating.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the room? Okay, I understand you had a comment that came in via email.
Yes, there were evidently a couple.
Yes, we received some last minute ones.
Okay.
That's why I left the room.
So if we can go ahead and read those, and then we'll open this up to online people to raise their hands and speak.
Okay, lower my comments for the meeting tonight. I have a conflict with part of the meeting, so in the event that I'm not back, I would like this to be sent to the board members or read aloud. I am ready to express my support for Copper Leaf having outdoor seating. In the interest of transparency, I am employed as a server at Copper Leaf, but I am writing with my own viewpoint, not representing my employer. As a village resident, I value having more outdoor seating options in the village, especially in the summer, and especially as COVID continues. Every shift that I work, people ask if there is outdoor seating available or if they are allowed to sit outside. I've not seen any unruly people while I've worked, and I think that that's partly due to the nature of the business. It's high-end beer, not cheap stuff that people are binge drinking. I realize there are neighbors nearby with differing viewpoints. I hope that a common ground can be reached with regard to hours of operation for outdoor seating or something to that effect that would be congruous with other adjacent businesses like Label 7, Olives, and Neutral Ground. I hope the board will consider it. Thank you for your time. Brooke Fossey, 67 State Street.
Okay. And you said we had another comment?
We have a letter from John Limbick at 62 State Street. He says, application of 50 State Street, Northfield Common Buildings, G, Copperleaf Brewing for outdoor seating. Since I cannot present my objections to this application in 3 minutes, I am listing them here for the board's consideration. So let's take a few minutes. I think it's disrespectful, elevate, typical for this property owner to ignore questions 3, 4, and 5 of the application. The April 13, 2022 letter to the Village of Pittsburgh PZBA, in paragraph 5, the applicant states that they have demonstrated that they haven't been a nuisance to the neighbors. They have no data to suggest that 8 people drinking will not create additional noise. The April 13, 2022 letter to the Village of Pittsburgh ZBA, in paragraph 4, the applicant requests the same type of outdoor seating that is enjoyed by their adjacent businesses. Those businesses receive their approvals after following all of the village's requirements and participating in a review of their business, their practices, and complying with village protocols for these types of business. Copperleaf and the Fox Group eschewed any type of village oversight and is now seeking the relief afforded to those that followed the rules. In the January 3rd, 2019 minutes of this board, the following points were noted. The owner provided the proposed hours of operation, specifically stated that there is no plan for outdoor seating. That was amended 2 paragraphs later to state that there is no plan to have outside seating or live music. On several occasions, Attorney Turner questioned the percentages of agricultural product processing versus selling and marketing. The percentage ran from 50-50 to 85-15. The board determined that processing agricultural products was the use of this business. I feel that it legally is not a brewery. Resolution 2019-2 included special permit application to trustees dated 7/16/18, attachment A2, site plan. There is none. In late 2021, I submitted a FOIL request to obtain a copy of the site plan for 50 State Street. I received minutes from several planning board meetings where components of a site plan were discussed and in only some instances tentatively agreed to. There is no approved final site plan with the requisite signed drawings. Even if there was, the restriping of the parking lot last summer would have required the site plan to be updated. It was also interesting that the restriping enlarged the fire zone in front of the building where the outdoor seating might be located. The approval finding G stated no outside seating. The decision was limited to particular facts, not broadly construing as permitting brewing in a B4 district. Item 6, New York State Fire Code in section 511.2.6, driveways serving more than 4 buildings refer you to Fire Code section 503. New York State Fire Code 503.4, obstruction of fire access roads states that fire apparatus access roads shall not be obstructed in any manner. In many instances, the uniform codes allow for the authority having jurisdiction, village fire marshal, or the fire official, fire chief, to amend segments of the code, typically to make them more restrictive. This section of code does not offer any such modification. I feel that this negates the chief's approval of blocking the fire lane with outdoor seating. Also, how will this precedent be avoided when the next business seeks to block the fire lane? Will we simply state that only producers of agricultural products can block fire lanes? From my personal standpoint, allowing seating and alcohol consumption in a designated fire zone is reckless, regardless of the fire chief's endorsement. Yes, if there is an incident, 4 tables and 8 chairs can be moved quickly. This site is not readily visible to motorists traveling along the one-way traffic pattern of the property. Someone turning towards State Street could drive right into the seating. What would be the village's exposure to be in this situation? In conclusion, I am absolutely dead set against granting amenities to businesses who refuse to follow the same procedures that every other business in the village had to follow. This business was allowed to operate as a producer of agricultural products so that they could avoid the process. Now they want the same amenities as their neighbors. The property owner refuses to comply with village requirements, i.e. no site plan, and the adjoining neighbors suffer from his lack of regard, along with any relief from the Village of Pittsburgh. I have printed copies if you would like.
Sure, I'd like one. May need to take some time to look this over at some point. How many copies are there? Oh, there's only 1 copy?
Yep, there's more.
Here, hand it down to Mindy, maybe see if she wants to glance through it.
Dave, your packet is under your name.
Okay, so I'll make just some quick comments on that. And the business operating in the building is not under review by us tonight. They are operating legally as far as Steve, they're a legal business at this point, right? And that is all we are concerned with, and this is purely a application for outdoor seating. And I don't see the relevance of how the building is being used.
That business was completely approved and run through Albany and all the checks and balances before they were allowed to open and operate.
Okay. And there was a comment about not being a site plan, and we most definitely approved a site plan for the site. I don't know if every single condition has been complied with or not. That would be upon the building inspector, but there definitely is a drawing, and quite a bit of time was spent talking about that. Those are just two comments I have. As far as the rest of that, Steve, do you have any comments regarding the fire code compliance? Or do you want some time to think about it?
What I'm saying in regards to this, the seating here is farther away than currently existing outdoor seating on the site. It exceeds the closest home, 58 State Street, by 50 feet compared to Olives, and another 22 feet from Label 7. It's 22 feet farther than Label 7 from the closest house, which is 58. I don't know what else to say. They're operated a clean business. There's never been one complaint in regards to this business since they've opened. I've heard nothing but good things from local residents in regard to this business.
Well, I think this one resident had a complaint. I can't think. So.
But it is a constant issue between resident and the property owner, not the business owner.
Okay.
So did Mr. Lembeck submit this prior to the change from tables and chairs to just chairs?
That was submitted today. I'm not sure when that change occurred. I received that, and I apologize, it would have gotten to the board sooner. It came in at 2:41 today.
Right. So he didn't know that we're just
Correct.
talking about chairs.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Yeah, this was thoroughly discussed with the fire department and the fire chief, and there's a letter with his complete approval for it.
Okay, so yes, we have a letter from the fire chief who said he found this to be acceptable, which is very good. And Steve, as fire marshal, do you have concerns? This letter brought up some regulations and code.
No, and the fire lane that's in front of the building is regulation fire lane. It's not any larger or smaller than what's supposed to be. It is a regulation fire lane.
But in terms of putting something in the fire lane and blocking it, that was a comment that was raised. Do you have?
These chairs can be removed in about a minute if you had to.
Okay, so what is your finding is that's acceptable?
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess the official comments from the fire marshal and the fire chief is the proposal as submitted is acceptable for compliance with safety and fire regulations. Does any other board members have comments on that?
I do not.
Okay. Is there any other people online that are looking to speak?
We have another resident letter that came in as well.
Okay.
And then we have comments online. So I'll let Kristen go ahead with the next one.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, please accept and read into the record a couple of brief but critical comments regarding the request for temporary outside seating. A use for which outside seating was specifically called out as not permitted as part of Copper Leaf's Brewing Company's original conditioned approval. While I am supportive of all businesses appropriately permitted in accordance with the village zoning, the concern here is that this is an example of how zoning regulations, if not appropriately enforced, are gradually diluted and chipped away when conditions of approval are violated, both to the detriment of the code itself and counterproductive to the purpose for which regulations are enacted. Furthermore, in addition to violating a key condition of the original conditioned approval, the request, if granted, would violate the following highlighted section 195-17.1B of the Village Code, more specifically, that access road and fire lane shall be adequately maintained and kept free and clear of obstruction at all times. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. And then there's a screenshot of the code. And then this is the second part of this.
Who is that from?
This is Mr. Pierce from 50 State.
70 State Street.
70 State Street.
And this is also
In addition.
in addition. Evening, Dorothea. Please also share this photo taken 15 minutes ago and present the question to the PZBA members this evening as to whether or not they would agree that failure to post a public hearing notice sign is in violation of the zoning code application public hearing process. Flagrant violation of the Village Code zoning review process, which precludes the application from being heard this evening. Interestingly enough, the applicant for the 42 Monroe Ave application had a public notice sign clearly posted on their front lawn. Thank you.
So was there no sign posted on the property?
The sign's been there for about 12 days now. I put it there personally. It's right on the front corner of the building facing Chain Place.
At 50 State Street.
Yeah,
Unless it
50
moved.
State, right at Copper Leaf, right on Copper Leaf.
I saw it there this weekend, actually.
So you saw a public hearing notice sign? Okay. I often go out to look for them, but I didn't look this time.
I put that there personally.
It did just pour though. It could have blown away.
Okay, so we've had two commentary that a sign was posted. We are getting notices from neighbors, so obviously word has gotten out there. You'd sent mailings to all the neighbors, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, Steve, again, the code citation was brought up for the fire lanes. Did you get a chance to see this?
No, I have not seen any of that stuff. But as I said, the fire chief has approved it, and he is allowed to modify or, make comment on it. And if he has no issue, I don't understand why anybody would have an issue.
Okay, so, okay. Everything there is temporary, and you said it can be readily removed.
Right, and isn't the whole purpose of a temporary use permit for something that's not permitted by, by any of previous approvals or by zoning?
Mindy, you want to comment on that?
It is an approval process
For something that's not normally done?
for something that is not otherwise permissible.
Permissible, okay.
So I think when we looked at some of this, things that can be done as of right, you don't need to apply to a board to do. And then there are other things, like when we have the Christmas tree sales in front of the dairy, outside sales on the front lawn is not a permitted use. And so they come in for a temporary permit to do a temporary activity. So we can grant temporary permits for things that don't normally comply with the regular zoning code. That's my understanding.
The other thing, it could be revoked at any moment based on something, a complaint or them not complying, correct?
We normally have a process for revocations. But we'll get to that. Let's get through comments. Are there any more comments, or is that it?
Yes, we have quite a few online comments. We have Mr. Limbeck and Mr. Pierce both have their hands raised to speak again. I'm going to ask the board if you're going to allow that. They already had submitted their comments.
I don't normally have a problem with.
I'm just asking because sometimes it's up to you. I just want to make sure.
I usually, we need to hear from people. I know we sometimes cut people off, but it's helpful to let people air their thoughts.
I would just ask them not to be repetitive over comments that have already been made.
Okay, that sounds fair enough. So by all means, if you want to present some more information and have it not be repetitive over previous submissions, that is fine.
And I would also remind the board that this is not a debate. These are public comments. You don't need to respond to every one of them as long as you proceed with them.
Okay, thank you.
We have a Q&A from Karen Smith. My husband and I frequent Copperleaf Brewing, and I believe outdoor seating would be a good option. Copperleaf customers would love an option to sit outside during good weather. Ed Smith, other businesses within Shane Place properties opened without outdoor seating and then realized a need based on requests from their customers. These businesses now have been granted their request. Should the business not be granted the same opportunity? This is the reason for this meeting. Okay.
Hello, Gabriel Diaz at 81 South Street. I'd just like to say I'm very much in support of this. I have been at many meetings related to Copperleaf and the issues brought up by the two neighbors who are in opposition of this. And throughout all those meetings, I think it's become clear to me that I see no evidence that there are any more than two people in this village that are in opposition to this sort of change for Copperleaf. I think that I've seen a large rotating cast of people that are very much in support of Copperleaf getting, for example, this outdoor seating. It sounds like it's compliant. I think this is really the right move. I think this is a no-brainer, really. If it's compliant, if it's safe, if everyone's given it the appropriate due diligence and thumbs up. So really, I'm very much in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Emily Diaz at 81 South Street. I also wanted to voice my support for this application. I think we've all seen the success of the new pavilion down in Shane Place the past year. So I love seeing more outdoor seating. As others have noted, both Label 7 and Olives right next door have outdoor seating. So not sure why Copperleaf shouldn't. I don't think 8 more chairs would add much noise to the neighborhood. And, you know, so those two residents who chose to buy a house abutting a commercial area, they might want to reconsider their address. So bummer, sorry.
Okay, are there any more comments?
Yeah.
Mr. Lindback, you can talk now.
Good evening. This is John Limbeck, 62 State Street, and I apologize. I would have been there tonight, but the website only allowed for a Zoom meeting. I didn't know you could be in person. I'll try not to be repetitive, but several of the comments that were made once my letter was written absolutely demand a rebuttal. If there is a site plan for this project, there is no signed drawing that states that a site plan was approved. I foiled this and I was told that what I got was all that existed for this property, and a drawing was not one of them. This property was restriped last summer, and that in itself would have required a re-look at their site plan. When they restriped it, they made the fire lane larger. The fire chief does not have the ability to weaken the code. In many instances, they're allowed the option to strengthen it and make it more stringent, but relaxing it is not an option. Once again, the CEO falls back on proximity to a business. I directly abut 50 State Street. Your code does not address proximity in any way, shape, or form. And again, your attorney opined that we are approving an action for a business. Well, approving a business is also a process, and this applicant and the landowner there determined that they did not want to go through the process, as did Label 7, Olives, and the other true breweries and taverns that are now being allowed outdoor seating. Thank you.
Okay. Next.
Ariane, you can talk.
Thank you. My name is Ariane Krenishin, and I own Abode, which is also located at 50 State Street. And as a business owner that shares both the parking space and the need for emergency services in that space, I just want to say that we would be very excited and openly welcome outdoor seating at Copperleaf. I'll keep it brief. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kendra, you can talk.
Thank you. Hi, Kendra Evans from 21 Rand Place. I think that we need to look no further than the Collins Pavilion for a demonstration of the fact that outdoor seating builds both commerce and community. And a temporary approval of seating would definitely attract even more dollars and community members to Northfield Common. I think it is the purpose of this board to ever meet the evolving needs of our village. And I think it's quite expected if a business is doing well, which they are, and I'm grateful for that they want to expand their horizons. And I think that it's a testament to the ownership, to the service staff, and to our community that we can all grow and evolve in a way that helps build commerce and community. So thank you. I support this effort.
Thank you. Mr. Pierce, you can speak now. Mr. Pierce, you're muted.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, once again, thanks. I'd like to reiterate what Mr. Limbeck had said, number one, and as I stated in my communication, that number one, the village code clearly states that access roads and fire lanes shall be adequately maintained and kept free and clear of obstruction of all times. I do not appreciate the snide remarks of some of the village residents or maybe town residents that are commenting on the concerns or not giving due weight to the concerns of residential properties that abut a commercial property when they don't have to live through major violations for a number of years that the property owner has. We are only asking that and understand that living next to a commercial property, there are rules and regulations both for residential property owners as well as commercial property owners. All we are asking that the village representatives, the officials, understand and recognize and support the village code as it should be. Parking, again, or any obstruction in a fire lane is clearly a violation of village code. As far as the pavilion and other facilities in Northfield Common, Shane Place, once again, I can speak with John Limbeck and certainly myself that we're certainly support local businesses. But when there is not the even-handed equal consideration of abutting residential properties, that is the concern. We are supportive of businesses. However, we ask the village once again, give due consideration and legal consideration to the laws that are in place. As far as the sign posting, that picture was sent to Dorothea around 5:15 this evening, or maybe 6 o'clock, something to that effect. There was not, in that picture clearly denotes, there was not a public hearing sign notice out there on State Street. Whether or not it was posted outside the particular Copperleaf building is a moot point. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chairman, that these signs have to be posted at public right of way, which in this case, around 6 p.m., there was no sign as evidenced by my photo. Thank you.
We have other comments?
That's all we have.
That's all you have. Okay. So there are no other typed comments in there?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Oh, Kendra has her hand up again.
I'll take this last one.
Okay.
But as you said, having people repeat themselves a lot, we don't need to have a.
Kendra, did you want to
debate.
speak again?
Oh, I do. And I had forgotten to say something. I apologize. It's not the same thing other than reiterating my support. It's simply that I would hope that we're not punishing a business for the sins of a property owner. I don't think that's fair. We're here to talk about one particular business for this temporary approval. I also think that it's important to consider what's in the best interest of all villagers, not the ones that all of us, whether we live directly next to this property or down the road from it. It's our tax dollars. All of these benefits are for all of us. So thank you.
Okay, so if that's it, is there anyone else in the room that would like to speak? Okay, quite a few comments. I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
Okay, how do you vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, so the public hearing is closed. So we had a draft resolution here, and I don't know if anyone's had a chance to read this. It doesn't have any findings filled in, but it does have a bunch of background paragraphs that cover some of the various, a couple explains the situation leading up to this and explains the status of this and the permissibility of the application. Also in this decision, if we happen to approve it, there are some draft conditions of approval that that are here that place limitations on what they can do and states what's being approved. So maybe it makes sense for everyone to take a glance through this if you guys haven't read this yet. And we have copies, if anyone in the audience wants to read this, we have copies of it here.
And it was also posted in the meeting packet. Right?
It is not in the online meeting packet, no.
It is not.
So the online meeting packet was published earlier, and this just came out, this draft came out not very long ago. So we had this discussion about that, and the clerk's opinion is handing out physical copies at the meeting is sufficient, but the question is, how do we get people online to see them? And do you have an opinion on that, Mindy? We could share it on the screen?
You share it on the screen.
We don't have it visually here.
Okay. Well,
You don't have a copy of it?
for next time, then.
We have, I need copies.
We do as practical for updating the packet. It's not always quick and easy to do.
I'm just looking for
It was in the piles.
A copy of it?
Yes.
Here, read it. Here you go. Oh, looks like here's one here. There's two of them here.
Okay.
I just have a, excuse me, I just have a clarifying question regarding the fire line and the fire marshal and the fire district, whoever said everything's fine. To what degree does that simply supersede the code as it's written, if it is in fact written the way that the residents expressed?
I mean, what I hear is, what I heard is, the term was you shall not obstruct the fire lane. And what I heard is both the fire marshal and the fire chief said this is not obstructing a fire lane.
Very good, thank you.
So that it's within what can be handled. A person could stand there in the fire lane as well, and obviously they can move out of the way. But obviously at some point, putting something there other than, say, a live body might rise to the level of obstruction, but so far, Steve, that's still your opinion, correct, that this is not an obstruction?
And the fire chief said that it would not be considered an obstruction. So,
Okay, perfect, so that's the clarity I needed. The other question is, with the stanchions that were expressed surrounding the tables and chairs, to what degree does that allow for outdoor drinking, standing room only types of conditions that may be different than just 4 people in a chair? Is that simply rise to the level where you would, as CEO, enforce any noise ordinances or concerns?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I would definitely keep a close eye on it, because I do care about the residents that are in proximity to the business.
Yep. Okay. And do you know approximately how much room there would be for that standing room only?
I would keep it, I would ask them to keep it as tight as possible to the chairs.
Within reason. Okay.
Within reason.
Very good. Thank you.
And there's no outdoor music, no, I mean, there's no, they're not going to create noise other than conversation that happens every day.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
And Steve, what about the signage? I mean, I assume being in front of the building, that's a public right of way.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Mindy, did you have any thoughts about the sign postage?
Yeah, from what I've heard tonight, it seems like the posting in the notice was adequate.
Okay, so a sign was posted, the residents were sent mail notices. It's been on the village website for about at least a week.
There was certainly a lot of public comment tonight.
Okay. And we heard both from Steve and from one of our board members that they saw the physical sign at the site. I don't know if it was physically present 2 hours ago, but it was previously present. Okay.
For how long, by the way?
Pardon?
When was it posted?
12 days ago.
12, okay.
Probably what I should do in the future is when I post a sign, I'll take a picture and date stamp it.
That could be done.
Yeah, not bad.
Just for, the record.
Yeah, email it to the record.
People still looking through this? Okay. So looks like we're taking a break here.
I'm just, sorry, I had to.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, by all means, you can read through this. And you don't have the ability to present the draft of this on the screen, the resolution?
No, not unless I was at my own computer.
If you want us to, we could go download it, put it on a flash drive and upload and show. If you want to give us 5 minutes.
Mindy?
It's probably not necessary now, but let's talk after the meeting about protocols going forward.
That would be good. That's, do you have any thoughts, anyone, on this draft resolution here? So far, we still have to fill in the blanks for any findings, but there's a bunch of terms and conditions that some of these are recycled from a previous one, and I talked this over with Steve, and he was okay with most of these. Mindy, you were okay with the terms?
I thought you did a great job. Yeah.
Okay, so I didn't hear any, the only comments I heard from residents was that they didn't want this at all. I didn't hear any comments about making a minor amendment to this. So that's what I had heard personally.
Well, I thought Mr. Limbick and Mr. Pierce had some substantive comments that were not just, we don't want this at all. But you received some other public comment that may have addressed those issues.
Okay. Mindy, I don't know if you thought we needed to discuss any of this any further, or I didn't know if anything needed more investigation. or if we should just start discussing findings.
Well, if the board wants to discuss any concerns or thoughts that they have about it, then the board can discuss it. Otherwise, if somebody wants to propose findings and a resolution, we can go ahead and do that.
Okay. Okay, I'm not hearing anything. I'd suggest we can start by discussing findings, and if there's any legal objection that's of concern, by all means, someone can speak up on that. So if we go through this, and I know we have a new member here, what we typically do is we have some type of draft resolution here, and then we discuss, there's usually fill-in-the-blank findings. So we go through and we'll discuss them as a group, come up with a few sentences to comment on it. Each of these are criteria that we're required to consider in support of the application. And then after we discuss all the findings, and we ultimately vote to approve or disapprove the project.
Okay.
So let's go ahead with number 1 here. Whether the action will or will not be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the chapter, taking into account the use, nature, and intensity of the operations involved, and the size of the site and access thereto. I mean, this is a commercial site. Steve, what were your observations about outdoor seating areas nearby? You said there are 2 other outdoor seating areas with similar distance.
Correct, they're actually closer to the residents than the proposal in front of you.
Okay, so an existing outdoor seating area already exists at Olive's Restaurant, and that is closer.
And Label 7. And of note too, that the seating in this establishment will be on the other side of the building, away from all residential structures, so that any noise generated from talking, it will be negligible.
You've received no complaints from Olives nor Label 7?
I would note that there, Mr. Limbeck's and Art's, Pierce's comments didn't really address their concern about potential noise as much as they were process oriented. So, and it seems like a lot of the comments in support were just enthusiastic supporters of the activity, but the other comments were pointed to
Their comments
process.
to me are more generated at the general site, overall site, not the business itself.
Right, that's right.
Yeah, we're not reviewing the business itself. I mean, what's going on inside the building, I don't know the details of it. I don't know whether it complies with that prior decision or not, but that's not before us tonight.
No, they comply with the rules of the State Liquor Authority and keeping a clean, quiet business. The patrons, like I said, and the residents seem to appreciate what they add to the village.
Okay, so for number 1 here, I said the area, I'm noting that the area is commercial. Other outdoor seating areas exist. Some of those seating areas are closer to the residents. And Steve noted that a building is going to be in between the seating area and the residential dwellings. So that will help restrict or block noise. But it's just going to be people sitting in chairs talking. And we've had this discussion with St. Louis Church, is that people are allowed to make noise on their property. They're just not allowed to make excessive noise that carries over the property line. And sitting in a chair talking, granted, some people could do, who knows what they could do. But Steve, you still have the ability, if there is unruly people, to bring some type of enforcement actions. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I mean, I personally don't see how 8 chairs 170 feet from someone's house is likely, in a commercial area, is going to be excessive noise.
I agree.
Okay, so let's move on to number 2, unless anyone else has anything to add. So I will say this will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the area, noting that this is a commercial district that already has outdoor seating. So number 1, I'll say it will. Number 2, the next thing is will this tend to depreciate the value of adjacent property, taking into account the possibility of screening and other protective measures. I mean, in my opinion, this is temporary activity at this point. It's not a permanent approval.
Yeah, say will not.
You say will not. So it's a temporary activity in a commercial district comparable to the activities already existing in the district.
Other comparable.
Other comparable activities. So this action will or will not create a hazard to health, safety, or general welfare. So we have heard the opinion of both the fire marshal and the building inspector that this does not represent an obstruction to a fire lane. It sounds to me like it's no more an obstruction than a person standing in the fire lane, because it can be readily cleared. And I am not aware of anything else other than listening to someone talk, which again, unless they're being unruly, in which case Steve can already handle that. We have measures to handle unruly people. I don't see how this would present any problems. Well, it will not.
You also mentioned that there won't be any permanently installed fixtures in that area.
Yes, nothing will be permanently installed. Everything will be removed nightly.
Yep.
Steve, if you're going around that circle, the speed bump is right before that left-hand turn, if you were to go through the fire lane, is that correct? So you are naturally slowing down for the speed bump. So the residents' concern about somebody turning through that lane would require a very fast acceleration after that speed bump.
And I mean, we require somebody having some sort of an episode or something,
Right.
which you have the same safety issue with somebody walking in there
That's
as you would with somebody sitting in a chair.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so number 4, we've already discussed a lot of this. The action will or will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or be detrimental to the residents thereof.
Will not.
Okay, I hear will not. We already talked about this. It's a commercial district. The activity is comparable to existing activities already at the same site. I would say the same for 5. Action will not introduce substantial adverse impacts on the surrounding neighborhood. Again, the thing here is substantial. People sitting in chairs talking. I don't see that as a substantial impact. And as far as impacting the flow of traffic, Steve, you felt that no concerns about traffic?
No, it does not impede any traffic. The location will not impede any traffic flow.
Okay, so it will not impede any traffic flow, and one of the conditions of approval is the entirety of the activity will stay within that fire lane and cannot block traffic or interfere with traffic or interfere with parking spots.
Correct.
And so if somehow this starts spilling out, that is something that's totally upon the building inspector to be able to enforce. Then as far as pedestrian safety goes, I think that's the same story as traffic. It will not impact that. Pedestrians can still walk around. Steve, did you have any other thoughts on pedestrian safety?
No, this doesn't impact any pedestrian flow or anything, and there's nothing in there that should be a danger to any pedestrian.
Okay. So the next one is the action will or will not be a nuisance or create offensive odors or noise. I think we all agreed that regular usage, people sitting in chairs talking, is not a nuisance, and we have a mechanism of handling unruly people. The next one, the fire marshal reviewed plans, and basically your comment is this does not constitute an obstruction of a fire lane.
Non-permitted obstruction of the fire lane has been approved by the current fire chief. The other thing I want to note that the volume of people that will be there is 6 to 7 times less than already existing outdoors at Olives today.
Okay, so this is only about the seating area is only like 1/6, a fraction of the size of the already existing ones.
Yes.
Okay. Any other thoughts from anybody? Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the resolution, taking in the findings that we discussed tonight.
You want to mention what the proposed conditions might be?
Yeah, shall we just read the list of conditions?
Yeah.
All right. I will hand the copy over to, mind doing the exhausting work of reading the conditions of approval? I hear that's a yes. You can hand it to Dorothea to read.
It's okay. Okay, so the conditions are, number one, this temporary permit is valid for June 2nd, 2022 through October 31st, 2022. The temporary outdoor seating area may operate during the following times: Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. to 9 p.m., Friday and Saturday, noon to 10 p.m., Sunday, noon to 8 p.m. The temporary outdoor seating area shall consist of up to 8 temporary chairs and a temporary rope or fence barrier. All items associated with the outdoor seating area shall be located within the fire lane adjacent to Building G at 50 State Street. All items associated with the outdoor seating area shall be removed nightly, no later than 30 minutes after the time listed above. Removed items shall be stored indoors, including all chairs and temporary rope fencing. Failure to remove items may lead to enforcement action brought by the code enforcement officer. All outdoor trash associated with the activity shall be removed nightly. The Village of Pittsford building inspector shall approve of materials and location of the temporary rope fence barrier. The Village of Pittsford building inspector may authorize changes in the layout of the seating and temporary rope fence barrier, but they shall be located within the fire lane. The temporary outdoor seating area shall comply with all requirements and directives instated by the New York State Liquor Authority, Village of Pittsford Fire Marshal, Village of Pittsford Building Inspector, Village of Pittsford Code Enforcement Officer, and Pittsford Fire Chief. Village code enforcement officials shall be allowed to conduct all necessary code inspections. No outdoor music or outdoor entertainment is permitted. The outdoor seating area shall not block drive lanes or parking spots. Copperleaf Brewing Company will inform the village if they receive any complaints or requests regarding the event. The board reserves the right to revoke the temporary zoning permit if operation of the business creates traffic hazards or unsafe conditions for pedestrians, creates excessive and disruptive noise, or if there are health, safety, or welfare concerns that are communicated to the applicant and not resolved. If there is an emergency condition, the zoning board of appeals may revoke the permit and provide the applicant with a post-revocation hearing. If there is a non-emergency condition, the zoning board of appeals shall provide the applicant with notice and an opportunity to be heard on the revocation. The zoning board of appeals shall have sole discretion to determine whether a condition constitutes as an emergency.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we read the conditions in. I'll make a motion to approve the resolution. I think that, or is that already out there?
It's already out there. It needs a second, maybe.
No, second?
Okay, how do we vote?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay.
This is Brian Meyer. May I ask one question?
Yes.
First of all, thank you. So my question is, with the one condition where you say that all the things must be stored indoors, we do have limited space indoors. There is some space on the side of the building between the parking barrier and the side of the wall that is on the left as you face the front. If we were to place those chairs and stanchions in that space that does not block any parking spaces or any walking area, is that acceptable?
Steve, I think, do you have a comment on that?
Catch that.
He wants to store the stuff outdoors instead of indoors.
Pardon?
He wants to store the tables and chairs outdoors instead of indoors.
On the little back porch would be, I mean, there's a little porch that's unused on the back side. He cannot put the chairs in the fire lane or in any parking space.
Correct. But there's that, where the parking spaces are on that side where the porch is, there's that parking barrier that as the parking spot comes up, there's a barrier and there's like a 1.5 foot space between that barrier and the side of the building that does not block any parking spaces or any walking area. Is it possible to place the chairs and the stanchions there?
Brian, what we can do is I can come down and we can look at the space. You gotta ensure that we aren't touching any parking space or affecting any walking or fire lane with any of the materials. I would think that stuff you could get back on that little porch and maybe behind the building, but nothing in any of the parking areas.
I guess I don't have a problem with bringing it inside if the business is closed. But you know, we also don't want to see clutter littering around the area there when it's not in use.
Yeah, and I agree with that. The thing is, like we say, we can bring them indoors, but there are days when it's going to be inclement weather and we won't be able to put those chairs outside. And we really don't have space inside the building to store things. If you've ever been in there, we have very limited storage space. That's all. I can work with Steve, and if he feels that it creates clutter or something, I guess we'll figure out what we'll do. The main thing is we appreciate the fact that you've taken this time and approved our request.
So I guess I would maybe suggest we make a motion to amend our conditions of approval to say that they can be stored indoors or other suitable location approved by the building inspector.
Right.
That would be great. Thank you.
Is that acceptable to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, can we get a second?
Second.
How do we vote? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay.
Motion carries.
Thank
I
you.
will ensure the store that it's safe for the public and for the business development.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And obviously, if it becomes a problem, you'll hear complaints from anyone and handle it accordingly. All right, well, thank you. With that said, I think that concludes what I'm going to be handling tonight.
Brian?
He's already out.
He's gone.
What do you want to do? Do I want to do minutes?
No.
Or I've looked over minutes. Personally, I'm fine with whatever amendments people want to make. You can do it when I'm not here. If we still have a quorum, I believe.
I'm not sure everybody's read the minutes yet.
No.
No.
So, and I also think, given, the agenda tonight, that we could read them and postpone
I'm fine with that.
consideration of the minutes.
I was going to defer to the rest of the board on what to do with the minutes. Okay.
I missed who seconded that amendment.
I did.
You did, okay, thank you.
I think this is all my stuff. I didn't grab anything of yours, did I? Is that mine?
Yeah.
You've got a small pile.
Is there a resolution for me? About voting day?
Yeah, all the resolutions are for 75 Monroe are
So
right there.
this is a new one?
Those are all the new ones.
Okay, so I am going to go ahead and leave and let the board handle the next matter of 75 in a row. If there's a way I can get out of here. On there.
Rounder through.
This way?
This will be easier, I'm sure.
Oh, everybody's cleared out, okay.
Is there a resolution about the vote? About you?
Yes, somewhere. Yeah, give us just a second, though. That'd be great.
Can you find it? Thank you.
Is this yours?
No, yeah, I'll just put it in the back. You want me to-
Oh, yes. It would be in the back of the packet.
The last sheets in the packet.
Oh, I didn't read it.
Resolutions. Yeah, I mean, I have.
Okay.
Do you have it?
Yeah, I got it. It's gonna be-
Yeah, that one
You got
didn't
it?
change.
Fine.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, okay. That's a still.
It was in your original packet that you
Right.
got. Yeah.
Did you get your 75 comments?
Okay.
Hand it out. Oh, we got it here. No, I don't know.
Kristen, this is simply the full printed out packet.
Correct.
Okay.
That's the draft.
Is there another one of these?
Yeah, we do have one more. I just
Yeah.
put it here. There you go.
Okay.
Yep.
So, we're good? So as the first order of business tonight, I have been acting chair of the 75 Monroe Planning Board since 2015, and let's just say my hair was a different color back then. And so tonight I have decided to relinquish that role, but I certainly will always stay part of this 75 Monroe board. Dave Marshall has agreed to take this up. Thank you. And so I believe that we do need to vote on this. We don't have straws. I think the first time we voted, when I became acting chair, there was a short straw involved. Right. Okay, so I move that Dave Marshall henceforward become the acting chair for matters 75 Monroe. So a second?
Second.
And Katie, how do you vote?
Aye.
Aye, I guess.
Aye.
Suppose we can vote for ourselves.
Yeah, take
I don't know.
take it away.
All right.
Motion carries.
So first off, thank you for your extended effort and expertise and work to support the village in all these matters. In that this is my first time, I just asked Mindy to chime in if I'm ever going off course and astray from a legal perspective, and members to chime in if they'd like to interrupt and interject in ways that might be beneficial to the proceedings. So as you may already know, at this meeting, we'll discuss the project located at 75 Monroe. We have some housekeeping items. First, please be aware that the exits in case of emergency, and silence all your devices. Tonight, we'll end the meeting at 10 o'clock with a 5-10 minute break, somewhere around 8:15, maybe 8:30. We have more work to do. We will schedule a special meeting. Before we get started, we have a few resolutions to address in advance. These resolutions are specific to the State Environmental Quality Review, seeker, escrow for engineering and legal services, and the determination that we have received a complete application for site plan review. I'll read each resolution out loud, offer discussion to members of the board as needed. Then proceed with a roll call. Oh, yep, I'm going to jump in on that a little bit later.
Sorry.
So we're just going to do some housekeeping items.
Just wait a minute, please.
Okay, very good. So with that in mind, resolution 1 is, so that one's done. Resolution regarding the application for site plan review, specific to seeker. So at a regular meeting in the village board, duly convened on June 1st at 7 p.m., the following resolution is offered. The action is considered, this action is consideration of applications for LWRP determination of consistency and amended site plan approval for the Westport Crossing project consisting of 150 residential units in 8 buildings to be located on 7.39 acres off of 75 Monroe. The proposal also includes access drives, parking, sidewalks, landscaping, clubhouse, pool, and public access docks. The application for amended site plan approval is a type 1 action pursuant to State Environmental Quality Review Act, 6 New York CRR 617.4, and Village of Pittsford Code, Chapter 93. On October 12, 2010, the Village Board of Trustees declared itself the lead agency for seeker review for this project. The project was considered a type 1 action requiring coordinated review. After declaring itself lead agency and performing coordinated review, the Village Board, in a resolution dated August 9, 2012, issued a negative declaration of environmental significance for the project. On November 14, 2014, the Planning Board granted the applicant site plan approval for the project. The Planning Board retained T.Y. Lin to assist with project review pursuant to Village Code 210.19.5. T.Y. Lin has determined that the amended site plan is not substantially different from the approved site plan. Therefore, be it resolved, the 2012 neg deck for this project is binding on the Planning Board. No further action is required by seeker. Could I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
And seconded?
Second. Roll call. Member Loda?
Aye.
Member Shannon?
Aye.
Member Hoppen?
Because I have just joined this board, and this is a long-standing matter to which I am not at all familiar with yet, although I hope to be at one point, I'm going to abstain from this motion as well as any other further motions regarding this matter tonight.
Okay. Chair Marshall?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Resolution number 2 regarding escrow. I'll skip to the whereases.
This action is consideration for application to the local waterfront revitalization plan, determination of consistency and amended site plan approval for the proposed Westport Crossing project, consisting of 150 residential units and 8 buildings located at 7.39 acres off 75 Monroe. The proposal includes access to drives, parks, sidewalks, landscaping, clubhouse, pool, and public access dock. Heard that before. The planning board referred the project application to T.Y. Lin and the Zoglin Group, PLLC, pursuant to Village Code 210-19.5, to assist with the project review. Village Code, same one, A, requires the consultants to estimate their fees for services to be rendered. The same code again requires the board to determine the amount of the consultant fees. The consultants have provided the board with estimates of fees for services to be rendered to assist with the project review, copies of which are attached here to Exhibit A. T.Y. Lin provided the scope of services estimated at $25,700, and the Zoglin Group PLLC provided the scope of services to be estimated at $5,000. Now, therefore, be it resolved and determined that the applicant shall make an escrow deposit of $25,700 for services by T.Y. Lin, rendered by T.Y. Lin. The applicant shall make an escrow deposit of $5,000 for services rendered by the Zoglin Group. This has already occurred, but we're putting the resolution in final form. Shall anybody move forward with this resolution?
So moved.
Second?
Second. Or did you second? You second?
You can third.
Member Loda?
Aye.
Member Shannon?
Aye.
Member Hoppen?
Abstain.
Chair Marshall?
Aye.
Motion carries.
And our third resolution regarding Westport Crossing application for amended site plan approval. Whereas T.Y. Lin has received PCP's application for amended site plan approval dated November 12, 2021, and determined that the application materials satisfy the requirements of Village of Pittsford Code Article 34, Site Plan Review, and therefore complete. Now, based upon the foregoing, it is hereby resolved that the planning board, that PCP's application materials for amended site plan approval satisfy the requirements of Village Code Article 34, and is therefore complete. And it is further resolved that T.Y. Lin is directed to deliver Task 2 Site Plan Review. I will present this for approval.
So moved.
Second?
Aye.
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 Abstain.
Motion carries.
All right. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, that's done. It's somehow- So now that that's complete, I'd like to backtrack a bit and offer a short welcome and introduction. So first, I'd like to welcome the applicants, I believe here tonight, specifically Mr. DiMarzo from Mark IV Enterprises, their counsel Christian Nadler, architects Craig Jensen and Dirk Schneider from CJS Architects on South Union Street in Rochester. I believe we're welcoming Jim Burton from T.Y. Lin. Thank you. The engineering firm assisting in the review of the project, and Peter Vars from BMI Engineering, I believe. In addition, many of you already know the existing members of this board, Susan.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
we left out special counsel John Mancuso.
I'm sorry, Special Counsel John Mancuso. Welcome, good to see you. A new face in the room. Thank you. In addition, many of you may already know the existing members of the board, Susan Loda, Joanne Shannon. You may also know alternate Stacy Freed and our counsel, Mindy Zoglin. I'd also like to welcome officially Katie Hoppen, who is replacing John Kachura's position on the board that expired, I believe, or was transitioned over on Thursday of last week. I don't think I missed anybody else. Yeah. So for tonight's meeting, just, yes, please.
For the record, we have Andrew Collini from my firm here as well.
Welcome, Andrew. Andrew Collini. Tonight, just on comment with regards to Member Hoppen's abstention and comments regarding 75 Monroe, we do have a quorum of the 3 members here. Ms. Loda, myself, and Ms. Shannon. I asked that alternate Freed, if she'd like to, she's certainly welcome to join us at the table and join us in our discussions through the proceedings, but simply ask that she would not vote at the conclusion of any matter settled tonight. Yeah, you're welcome to come on up.
Is the chair softer?
Probably not, no. Yeah, all right. Yeah, there's more lights up there.
Mr. Chairman, why did you vote, just for the record?
Yep, for the record, there are currently 5 members of the board. However, only 1 member at any time can live outside of the village. Both Ms. Hoppin and Ms. Freed live outside the village. Therefore, only 1 can be a member at that time. As a result of Ms. Hoppin's participation on the board, while she may abstain from specific votes, she's still on the board at this time.
Thank you very much. Oh, that didn't mean you have to get up and leave.
So tonight's meeting, this will be my brief introduction as to how we all got to where we are, and then we'll get right into things.
Excuse me, before we start, I think we need to do an ethics disclosure.
Okay, yep. Thank you. I actually had that before even the acting chair, and Susan, you filled in so well, and I skipped it. So are there any conflicts of interest with regards to the proposed application before us tonight?
No, I do not have any.
I do not have any.
None.
No? Ms. Freed? No? Do we have none? Anything else? No? Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So tonight's meeting is specific to the local waterfront revitalization consistency review for the proposed application. The LWRP for short, is required as per village code. The outline for tonight's meeting will start with a short introduction, then a list of the documents received for the application, then provide the applicant with time to present the project, followed by some general questions by members of this board. We will then open a public hearing, possibly close the public hearing, then perhaps leave open a public comment period, and follow up with additional discussion between the applicant and the board. At the conclusion of our discussion, we'll then begin the LWRP consistency review. Before we begin, I'd like to offer a brief history specific to the LWRP and how we arrived at tonight's meeting. In November of 2014, the Planning Board granted site plan approval and purported to make an LWRP consistency determination. However, members of the public successfully argued in court that the LWRP consistency determination was not completed properly. In 2015, Monroe County Supreme Court confirmed that the Planning Board did not make a proper LWRP determination, nor was a coastal assessment form provided. After waiting a while on legal proceedings, in 2017, Monroe County Supreme Court remanded the applicant's application for a certificate of approval to the APRB, now the HPB, for reconsideration, and subsequently, the applicant submitted an application for certificate of approval, and the APRB directed the applicant to provide a coastal assessment form needed for the LWRP review, and then referred the application to the Planning Board to determine if it conforms to the approved 2014 site plan. It is then, in 2018, when the Planning Board completes its first LWRP consistency review. The Planning Board determined that the project was inconsistent with the LWRP. In 2019, the applicant asked the Planning Board to rehear its application for an LWRP consistency determination. The Planning Board agreed, and again determined that the project was inconsistent with the LWRP. At that time, the applicant commenced an Article 78 proceeding challenging the LWRP inconsistency determination. The Planning Board moves to dismiss because the applicant did not exhaust all administrative remedies. Judge Ark directs the applicant to exhaust administrative remedies as required by village code. The applicant appeals. Simultaneous to the appeal, the Planning Board heard from the applicant regarding an administrative appeal and determined that the application was inconsistent with the LWRP administrative appeal. In 2020, Monroe County Supreme Court affirms that the Planning Board's determination of inconsistency held. The applicant fails to perfect the appeal, and the Planning Board's determination stands. As of today, there are no outstanding court cases. All cases have been determined. We are not in settlement negotiations. As with any new application, there are code requirements. These code requirements extend beyond simple zoning requirements. These requirements include things such as the LWRP consistency review and the HPV certificate of appropriateness. These are independent determinations. This application is in the R5 zone, and the prior site plan satisfied the zone's requirements. A site plan was approved. A negative declaration for seeker was already determined by the village board. Typically, the LWRP consistency determination precedes the site plan review. In this instance, the site plan approval was granted prior to the LWRP consistency determination. As a result, in a way, we are working backwards. Tonight, we have an amended site plan. The process for this application first came before our board. This application first came before our board as part of a concept review discussion in December of 2021, with some prior conversations, I believe, in September and October. After receiving the necessary documents and employing T.Y. Lin, among other things, to determine if the application was complete, we did receive a positive response from T.Y. Lin in April of this year. The document reflects on the differences and the similarities between the 2014 site plan approval, affirmed the amended site plan is not substantially different from the plans reviewed by the planning board as a basis for their previous determinations, and identify the LWRP policies which were considered inconsistent in the prior two LWRP reviews. Today, we will evaluate the consistency of this amended application relative to the LWRP. For this amended application, T.Y. Lin reviewed the following documents.
If I may just step in.
Yep.
I think you said that the board received the T.Y. Lin report in April. I think the T.Y. Lin report is dated April, but it was received by the board in May.
Thank you. Yep, it was April 29th on the date, and I remember putting April down thinking it may have been May, but just defaulted.
Right.
Very good, thank you. So for this amended application, T.Y. Lin reviewed and received, and this is included in the packet, a list of specific documents with specific dates associated. They included meeting minutes, site plan submissions, revised site plans, revised building elevations, revised LWRP application, comparative site plan comparisons, amended site plan, underground parking garage information, renderings of building elevations, decisions, orders and judgments, building square foot tables. We also received a coastal assessment form. It'd be hard pressed to figure out if we missed anything in that list, but I don't think we did. There is a list of items received in the packet as well. So at this time, we'll extend an invitation to the applicant, unless there's any additional comment from the board at this time. So at this time, we'd like to extend an invitation to the applicant to present a project. If there are specific references to the LWRP document, that would be particularly helpful. And at the conclusion of your summary, we'll ask some questions and then open a public hearing. So anybody who would like to come up and welcome to join us and chat, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking over and very thorough introduction. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for all your time and welcome.
Thank you.
My name's Chris DiMarzo. I'm the owner of 75 Monroe Avenue. I just wanted to go over a few key things and then we can start over where we left off in January. I think that it's very important that when we review the LWRP, that we put it in context and a framework for all the work that we have done. I promised everyone on my team that I wouldn't mention that this is our 171st meeting over 15 years. So I won't say that, but in all of these meetings, the LWRP really has served as a basis in everything we've done. It's one of the formatting basis for all the approvals that we have received. It is key in the R5 zone. This R5 zone was designed for this project. At the time, it was a larger project, and it specifically incorporated all of the components of the LWRP. This is a copy of the R5 zone. Number 5A, it says new development shall be consistent with the goals of the Village Comprehensive Plan, local waterfront revitalization program, and shall conform to the design principles outlined in the LWRP. In other words, the intent was if you get approved in the R5, it's assumed that you meet the LWRP. That was their intent when we did that in 2009. The LWRP theme continued through everything we did. We did an exhaustive seeker determination. It took 3 years, multiple consultants. It spilled over into our special use permit, which took another few years. Special use permit, this is a copy of it. This is from December 18th, 2012. The 13th, whereas number 2, just 2 sentences. The proposed development will be compatible in terms of scale, massing, orientation, architectural design with the visual character of the village and will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood, nor be detrimental to the residents thereof. The Village of Pittsford's comprehensive plan and local waterfront redevelopment program emphasize the importance of ensuring new development is compatible with the village's existing historic character. The assumption that new construction must blend harmoniously with the village is a primary intent of the R5. Again, it's just baked in. The LWRP is in everything that we've done as a basis. A few years later, as David mentioned, we received our preliminary and final site plan approval. And although it was determined that we never submitted a coastal assessment form, which we didn't because nobody knew what it was at the time, they still, in the final site plan approval, they still made an explicit determination that it met the criteria of the LWRP. They didn't just mention it. They went through all 15 of the criteria and reiterated why and how it mentioned it. So every step of the way, you cannot get away that the approvals that we have incorporate the LWRP.
Though you would agree that the legal proceedings suggested differently.
We are where we are today.
Right.
Because of those proceedings.
I'm just saying that
Yes.
At that time, that planning board agreed that this met the LWRP. And paperwork didn't follow through.
Certainly respect your
We are where we
opinions
are.
on the matter. We are where we are. Yep.
In all of those cases, that was for a project that was larger than what we're presenting now. The project started at 220 units, 185 units, 167 units when it was a special permit. Now we're down to around 150 units and 35% less overall mass than when we got the final site plan approved. I think it's a big jump. That's one. Number 2. What we're here today to talk about is local waterfront revitalization. Some of you may remember this picture of the oil tanks that were on the site. This is probably 25 years ago. When we took over the site in 2007, actually we in 2015 we performed the largest brownfield cleanup in New York State in 2015. These are some of the pictures of the work that we did out there. Literally hazmat suits. It took us about 2 years. We remediated 90,000 tons of contaminated soil, and it cost me $6 million. To put it in perspective, 90,000 tons of contaminated soil equals 6,428 dump trucks. To put that into perspective, if you took these dump trucks and lined them up one after another, it would extend for 33 miles. That's how much contaminated soil we took off this site that was leaching into the canal that we all love. To put it into further perspective, if you lined up those dump trucks on the thruway, it would extend from Victor to Batavia, 33 miles, and it would take you 30 minutes to drive that distance. That's the volume of soil that we cleaned up. I say that because it is huge, and it is a great cleanup, and it's the basis of why we're here. We're trying to revitalize this area, and it needs a special dispensation in your consideration for the work that we've done. I would appreciate it. Okay, we talked about the LWRP, and I'm confident that our plans as shown meet the LWRP in all 15 criteria, or the ones that are applicable. We last met in January 13th, it was online, and each of you that were on the board took your time and you explained to us your thoughts about the project, your comments. Was very helpful. I sat with my architects, we went back and we said, okay, what are they looking for? What can we do to make this work? And at the time, you discussed higher and lower building proportions, increase the height of third floors in some areas. I think those were some of yours. We talked about window variation. It was discussed that one building might want to look like a warehouse building, more plain. There was recommendations to break up the rhythm of the buildings from a third to something else. There was a request to add fourth story in some areas and break things up. Additional variability, less monotony, remove some angled overhangs. And CJS and I went back and forth, and they made multiple versions. And what we submitted, we think, answers some of those questions. There's about 20 measurable things that we did, and I can try to compare them and show you. And Craig's going to help me here.
Do we hold up one of these?
No, I can do it. We'll go. So, I guess building by building,
Excuse me, are you looking at the February 16th,
yeah,
2020?
I'm going to be comparing the February 15th submission with the October 27th dated submission. Okay, so building number one, we made no changes. I think the building has some great features to it. I love the front view that looks like, the barn on Chain Place. It's up and down, different colors, different heights. We didn't make any changes to that. We go to building number two, and I'll hold it up and you can stay with me. Building number two, compared to this top version, and mine has scribbles on it, but CJS took this opportunity to make the beginning of this building that uniform warehouse facade that was discussed in that January meeting. They took up about half of the building and really made it look like two clear buildings. They added a gable roof, one color on that side, and then on the far right side, they came up with some other changes, which were to create a mezzanine level, raise the roof of that area. And so in this section, there might be a fourth level or a unit that has 2 stories, or it could just be a higher ceiling that we discussed. But what it does is it creates a different roof type, a different gable, opportunities for roof decks and patios. Anything else to add on this building, Craig?
I'll add a little bit. But so as Chris mentioned, earlier, 4 of the buildings that we had done were kind of a tripartite, kind of 3-bay solution. And one of the concerns was that with 4 of these buildings like that, it maybe was getting repetitive, even though there was a lot of variation in those different buildings, they still were all based on that kind of overall layout. So this one building, building 2, we took the three-part division, really made it into more of a 2-part solution. So it's really, a left side and a right side. And then like Chris said, the mezzanine that we added to that upper floor kind of creates additional distinction or additional variation between now that foreground element that's 2 stories and the rear portion that is effectively 4. It doesn't classify as a 4-story building, so it won't be, by code, it's still a 3-story building, but that mezzanine gives it the impression of some additional, it gives it some real additional height and variation. So I think that's kind of where we went based on the comments we had to address some of the concerns.
I'll keep going and then we can come back.
Yeah.
No other changes to the other buildings until we get to building number 6.
If I may, before building 6, in building 5, is the middle windows that look slightly lower than this is for the 3rd story. It looks slightly lower than the windows on the left and right. Is that simply because there's a depth of field there? Or are they in fact a little lower?
In this area? Yeah, that is set back.
It's just
25 feet.
It's just a setback visual. They're probably at the same level.
Okay. And then this would be a roof terrace area.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry. So building 6.
Building 6, we started off with eliminating those angled roof overhangs. I think it might have been your comment, David, and we didn't disagree. There's really nothing like that, on the canal setting or in the village. It's just kind of a contemporary look, but we couldn't find a reason for it, and so we kept moving. But again, what we tried to do on this left side was bump up another mezzanine level to add another height variation and a different roof style. But then we continue with another roof terrace. The middle, again, is fairly consistent. And then on that far side, we changed that roof again to a turned gable style roof. And from the side, it'll look more barn-like or there was talk about window variation, and not just in this building, but all the buildings. We counted the different window variations. So, a single window with 4 panes, a double window with 8 panes, different windows with transom, sliders, transom on the side, transom on the front. And there are 19 different configurations throughout these buildings that are mixed and matched. So when you look at the big view from far away, it just looks like they're all little windows. But when you get into the detail, there is a lot of variation. And we've added, some more circular windows or other types of.
And you'll likely have other, like, frame colors or sash colors, in different buildings, depending on the palette. So there'll be a lot of variation.
Anything else on this?
No, I think you covered it. I think, the real distinctions between the heights and turning that one building to get the gable. And those shed roofs that were there, almost kind of like Chris said, more of a modern interpretation on a shed roof, almost like a butterfly roof. So I think getting rid of those makes sense, and going to more traditional styles that are more in keeping with the village.
Then building 7. The first biggest change in building 7 is that we eliminated this huge barn-like, gable in the back. And so it gives a different look right off the bat. The second thing is that about 2/3 through the building, we came up with a concept to set back the facade and make a clear break in the building. The intent was to make it look like two buildings. And then, Craig can explain to you why we didn't want to make two buildings because of fire access and elevators and code issues. But this building is set back about 20 to 25 feet. And, again, on my way here, driving over the bridge, the average driver going over the bridge on Monroe Avenue, looking over your shoulder, cannot see the farthest point of the site by driving. Maybe if you're, on the DPW side or on the canal side, you might be able to see it, but this building is so far down the site, it's hard to see.
Well, and as you're moving along the site, as a pedestrian or even, on a bike or whatever, as you experience these buildings, you'll experience them obliquely, and the gap will appear to be a gap until you're right upon it, and then you'll realize, okay, these are connected. But from an angled view, which is their normal way you're going to view these, you're not going to see that gap. You're not going to see the building behind the gap.
So 20 feet would be from me to.
It's basically half of the building width.
But if you could just put it in perspective.
I'd say that's pretty close, yeah. And the width of that gap is about 40 feet. So, you're talking about a 2-to-1 proportion in terms of the depth. It's pretty significant.
The other key to this is that we took off some of this heavy porch stuff on the corner in the beginning, just made a big building bigger. But, we went back to, some of your comments, and we thought this could be an appropriate area to make a true fourth story, although I'm not sure what the HPD will say about it, but, we're presenting it as an option, and it really does make true height elevations, and again, adds even more depth, more roof terraces, and really gives, that village look. On the far side, we just made some simple gables and then, finished off the building with 3 stories.
And I think the forward-facing gable on the right-hand side of the gap even makes a more clear break and distinction. So, there's really no continuity from what you see on the one side of the gap to the other. So it really starts to create a real distinction.
Why not 2 buildings?
So the difficulties with 2 buildings at this end of the site are really one of fire access. So the road that the fire trucks would traverse to service the site only really accesses the one end of the building, and there is a fire lane going down the back side. But if you separate the western portion, it will have limited fire access, and I think would probably be a little bit of an issue. The other issue that we get into with that is we've got one elevator and a couple of staircases in here. We would need to double that if we were just living in the two buildings. And it makes it more difficult to connect the parking underneath as well.
So you'd need 2 elevators.
Yeah, and access to parking on the western building would be difficult. So that's another kind of challenge that we would face.
Right, so just so I understand the fire truck accessibility, could you?
So when you have a building, there's a certain amount of frontage you're required to have that's accessible to firefighters, right?
Mhm.
And if a building doesn't have a street right in front of the building, you can't get enough frontage for the building to be serviced by the fire truck, essentially. And that last building, the width of the site starts to narrow down. You can't get a road to get all the way down there to service it. But if it's part of another building, then it's basically counted as part of the building adjacent. You know what I'm saying?
Almost approved by default, because the frontage is somewhere else.
That's right. You're getting credit for building a larger building, even though,
don't live down there.
You could suggest that it's no less safe by being separated. It might even be more safe by being separated. But as soon as you classify it as a separate building, it has to meet its own requirements. It can't piggyback onto the back of the adjacent portion of the structure, if that makes any sense. You follow?
Getting clearer.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yes, Stacy has a question. Is this supposed to?
Yeah, that's an old picture that should not have been put on that.
Okay. I'm not supposed to look at this and then look at this?
No, that's a mistake. Please cross that off. That's not our document.
Okay.
Must have pulled it off some old internet thing. But speaking of old pictures, again, I'm just pulling out the special use permit. And in the back of the special use permit, there's pages and pages of historical pictures to copy. And if you look at this picture from Lyons, New York,
Right.
the simple
Yep.
3-window gable design
Yeah.
is, just a one small feature that we just tried to incorporate, just to keep tying it into this canal historic style. So those are the major changes that we did. Again, I think this project, as shown in January, met the LWRP. I think the changes that we have made may in some aspects make it more in keeping with some of the LWRP principles, and happy to answer questions. I'd really appreciate an approval on this tonight, and so we can move on to the site plan and continue this project.
So at this point, I think what I'd like to do, did anybody have any additional comments from the applicant that they wanted to share with us tonight?
No, thank
you. So at this point, what I'd like to do is just allow the board to ask some questions, maybe some sort of top-level stuff. And then at that point, we can proceed with the public hearing. And then maybe some follow-up questions after that. Would anybody like to start?
When are you going to invite Ty Lynn up?
Oh, yeah, so I suppose.
No.
No, it's up to you, just, you may want to do that.
Yeah, would anybody like to come up here from TYLN?
Yeah.
Just in case we have questions?
Any questions for us?
We may.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
Sure.
Really? We'll give you a seat.
No.
Yeah. Sitting too long. Would it make sense to perhaps have Thailand summarize their comments and feedback following the application, and then we can, okay. So if you could maybe just offer some comments as to the work that you did and the conclusions that you've reached and the material you provided just to support what we're doing here tonight.
So actually, I think you did a really good job of summarizing the findings and conclusions that we came up with in the documentation that we've reviewed already. But I'll kind of highlight where I think we are at this point, which is to say that it appears to us that there were 3 of the 15 principles in the LWRP that the board had yet to satisfy itself. And not just this board, but the village at large. So And I'd also like to point out that, having heard some of the other public hearings that took place in the village government that Craig and Dirk participated in, they should mention that many of the changes that were made here were made as a result of those discussions and those public hearings as well. It really was kind of a holistic approach in our mind. So, we think that the charge before the board at this point is really limited to those 3 items that, you need to satisfy yourself that the position of the project as it exists right now with the modifications to the site plan and the modifications to the architectural plans that are before you satisfy those last 3 remaining items. Go ahead.
So I have a question. I thought it was just a kind of a curious locution when you were stating your opinion that the amended site plan is not substantially adversely different from the plans reviewed. And I thought that was an odd, almost a double negative in there. Could you paraphrase that opinion?
Yeah, that's, I sit on the State Board of Review, and that happens to be a term that we use often in the decisions that the state renders. So certainly there are fundamental differences between the site plan that was approved and the amended site plan that is before us now, but not adversely. So in other words, the buildings have shrunk, the green space has increased, all of these things really are differences, but they're not adverse differences. So to the extent that this board needs to consider whether or not any of those changes would adversely impact the village and the community at large, we think it does not. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks for that. But I also will continue with the 3, 1, 11, and 12, those 3 principles, which you have kind of given shorter versions of. So one, it's a quirk of the LWRP that not all considerations are of equal weight or complexity. And so that first one, goes into a little more detail than this one, and you might have just cited the whole principle, which I think is there's a little more substance to it than this. So that was kind of my, wondering why you chose to paraphrase
We
it.
pasted all 15 items in the preceding pages on the report, so I didn't think you needed to paraphrase all over again.
So number 1 is quite different than 1. If we're referring to the same considerations. So, hold on, I've got it right here. So the first consideration begins with foster a pattern of development in the LWRP area, right?
Yes.
Right. So I felt that your paraphrase was, just didn't hit all the substantial points that this first consideration did, which kind of has almost 8 points in it. Incorporate design guidelines, enhance community character, preserve open space, make sufficient use of infrastructure, beneficial use of the waterfront location, minimizes adverse effects, takes advantage of the community's location. I mean, that number 1 is just, very different in scope and detail from the other ones. And I just thought your reference to it as truncated.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
We're not suggesting that you look at less than what your local law states. You know what the law states, and you know how broad that number one principle is.
Right.
So that's the charge before the board, that's not for us to determine.
With regards to the work that you've done specific to green space, I know it's increased substantially, almost 40%. My question is with where the green space is it more or less within the density of the buildings? Meaning, I know some of it, the green space that was additive was towards the road on sort of that downward sloping area. But when you look at the building density, is the green space within that more or less generally? Like, have these buildings gotten a little tighter together? Or do you think they're a little less so?
So that, the answer to that question will be determined during our task 2.
Task 2, thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
You saw the plans, we dropped off some large drawings there somewhere.
Yeah, we have the minis.
We have.
The spreadsheet, or no, the PDF shut down my computer on many occasions. How big can I get this?
That's why we dropped off the large plans.
Yeah, we appreciate that. Yeah, for sure. So just a couple things, and this will have a lot to do with our discussion later that I'd ask the applicants. Could you share, well, before I move on, Susan, did you have anything else? Yeah. I hope you do, just before I proceed. So the first question is with regards to the clubhouse, the pool, that building that I've never seen a drawing for, I know nothing really about what's going on in there. Could you guys offer some clarity?
That would be a question for the applicant.
The clubhouse, the exterior garages, the gazebo was part of the original application in 2014. They really haven't changed much. I have a sketch of it if you want to see it. And it's not part of this submission because they haven't really changed.
Could you submit that?
Sure.
Yeah. So let's see. Let me start putting task items.
And I think we always thought that, the larger buildings were the primary challenge that we needed to work through with both this board and the other board. So that's where we spent our time thinking that if we could resolve the larger buildings, that these other structures, not only, had they been, I think, successfully developed before, but they would be easier to find common ground with you on because they're more easily envisioned how you get them to be consistent with the village character. It just seems like it's a much easier step.
Can you take a minute?
What, easier stuff because they're smaller?
Well, because you don't need to find ways to break down the scale as much because you're already starting at a smaller scale. So you don't need architectural devices that say, okay, how do we take these larger structures and turn them into like something that's more consistent with the village character, just like other parts of the village do. So, when you have this clubhouse.
He's going to describe it, but I have one copy.
And also to add to this, we're also holding back on this building that's in the forefront to see what the background buildings, the major buildings really are. So we don't draw something that then changes with siding and roof shapes. So we really wanted to have the main buildings set up that now we can focus and see what details have been developed for the majority of the buildings to make sure that this other building is complementary to the overall design.
So, go ahead, please. Well, I was going to say, as you can see, this is, I maybe showed it a little bit. That is the road south side. This would be the canal side. So it's a one-story building, but on the canal side, it will appear as a two-story building because of the slope of the site will essentially allow for a walkout situation on the lower level. The thought being, I think, that at the lower level, there'd be more services for people that would pull up, in a boat, and maybe there'd be some, I don't know if there'd be a livery operation for canoes, but, there's that type of activity going on there. Whereas the upper portion would be more the clubhouse portion if you had, some sort of, seating or lounge or other kinds of activities. That's really happening on the upper portion. You're entering the building from the rest of the development on the upper level, right?
What's the date of the rendering that you're referring to?
So this is actually dated November of 2014, November 29th, 2014. And like Chris said, we haven't altered this because we think it's pretty consistent with where we are going. And I think, as Dirk was saying, maybe there'd be some tweaks, and we'd work with the HPV on that. But the kind of overall scale and texture, gables, the way it breaks down is kind of what these larger buildings are now doing as well. So I think it's consistent.
So you would consider this in the same architectural style as the larger buildings?
I don't think it is quite the same style, but I think that's okay, because these other ones, have a flatter facade because they're more of a row, more of a commercial vernacular. This is not necessarily as commercial in that sense. It's more of a kind of outbuilding in a way. I don't think it's inconsistent, but this building is more seen in the round. It's a little bit more of a volume, whereas the other ones are a little bit more of a streetscape in some respects. So I think that's the distinction. But I think they're still consistent.
If I'm not mistaken, this building is directly on the canal. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And it would open up to a veranda of sorts that might go right down to the docking.
Correct.
And so of any building that you may see from Monroe as you come into the village, this would be on the forefront. And the same would be true of passing by boats, right?
Certainly, yeah, for the boats. I think if from Monroe, because it's lower, your sight line to it is going to be even a little more down. So, it's not going to have a profile against the sky, probably. The other buildings have a profile against trees in the distance or the sky or whatever. This is going to be a little bit lower, so the profile of this roof is probably going to be offset by buildings behind it instead of something else, right? So,
But this style, just to clarify, November 29th, 2014, this building was done in the style of the original application and have since not yet been amended. You kind of made some comments there that we wanted to get through the big buildings first, and then it's possible to come back through and work on this building more. Of course, we're not in the concept development stage. We have a completed application before us right now. So we will be, of course, needing to determine this building based on the drawings that are before us with regards to LWRP.
We're okay with that, right? Because
I think definitely with regard to the LWRP, the size, the scale, the use of this building is what it is.
And even the massing, the texture, the kind of overall kind of way it fits into the fabric, all those kind of things are what this design shows. The kinds of tweaks we're talking about that would be done potentially with the HPB would really be at a much smaller level that I don't think would impact the LWRP. It certainly doesn't impact the larger ideas that you guys are dealing with in terms of pattern development or, the preservation of the character of the village. I think, this is within that, I think, pretty clearly.
And am I also correct that as I look at the site plan, the boardwalk, if you will, that goes along the canal, that now we can go from, here to Fairport all along. The boardwalk, of course, at this time, the official one is maybe on the opposite side. So the conveniences that you're putting in for residents, public access, is it my understanding that the clubhouse and the pool would not be a public amenity, but would be private, direct to the dock, and the sidewalk would go around the entire facility and venue? Is that correct?
That is correct. The use of this building will be for the restaurant, which we have a special permit for. And in addition, it will be probably a recreation or fitness center for the residents, probably on the lower level. And it will also be public bathrooms on the lower level for the public to use on the dock that is accessible by the public. The local fire department also asked if they could use the dock to keep a fireboat there also, which I think would be great.
And if I may, the lawn to the left and the right of the, so within the LWRP document, they talk about a continuous kind of walkways through the canal frontage, but they also talk about green space and accessing. The lawn there on either side of the pool and the clubhouse, that would be publicly accessible?
Yes.
Okay, and that is, if I'm not mistaken, the most consistent of any of lawn, and it's about half the size of this building on either side, maybe if you look at the triangles. Okay.
Do you want to look at the bigger one, Dave?
No, I'm good with the little ones. I'm good. Another question, hang on just a second, here we go. When you think about building number one, from start to finish, relative to, let's put it in perspective for the public, Main Street, going from Four Corners, how far would you get? Would you get all the way to the flower shop, passing by Village Hall with one of those buildings? So Four Corners all the way to the flower shop? And that would just be one building, is that right?
We've done
I'm trying to
some direct comparisons before, but it's been a while now since we did those.
So share with me, what is the width again of the first building number one?
Can you pull that up? You know?
The length of it.
The length.
Length of building one.
May I ask a question while he's looking for that up? The 239M referral that came back mentioned something about streams and wetlands on the site. Where are those?
Yeah.
So the canal itself is designated as a regulated waterway, so it's the canal.
So that's what the 239M was referring to when it referred to both streams and wetlands. They were referring to the canal and its banks?
Yeah, that's a standard comment that the DEC uses. They don't clarify which one it is. They do a holistic approach just to make you aware there's a regulated water body either adjacent to or on the property, and that you have to investigate further.
Thank you.
They're going to be
174 feet long.
I'm going to say 175 feet about.
175 feet.
Dirk says 174.
174.
Yeah.
So approximately 60 yards, because everybody thinks in terms of football. 60 yards.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'd have to go back out to the village to see how far that would stretch.
I'm looking for that old presentation, keep talking.
Yeah.
I find it, I'll raise my hand.
Okay.
Yep.
We do have it.
So one of the things that I'm asking that question for is, again, embedded in the LWRP, is a lot of the size and scale or mass, whether or not it is detracting from village identity by being its own significant structure, that is recognized as sort of a single unit and bank. And I know, I do want to commend you for the work that you've done on the architectural drawings that you presented, Chris. There's some, I really do personally find many of these to be incredibly attractive buildings.
And I think, just to be clear, the fact that it's a single structure from the standpoint of the building code does not mean that it's a single structure perceptually. And there are buildings in the world that either look like one structure and are multiple structures, or look like multiple structures and are one structure. I don't think talking about this as a single building does the process that we're in justice. We shouldn't be thinking of those terms. This is a series of events along the path that creates, kind of this community or this architectural kind of backdrop for whatever happens here. And the increments within this building are increments that are very consistent with the village character. And whether it's 175 feet long or not, really has, in my view, nothing to do with what we're doing here. That 175 feet is immaterial. The fact that there's a gap between building one and building two is also, to some degree, immaterial. It's really more about the character that this creates, not about how long any one structure is. We can put a firewall between two of these buildings, and we can call it two buildings, and now each building is only 90 feet long. But it's no different.
Right, but we're not just looking at one building.
No, I understand. I'm just saying that measuring it in those terms, I don't think is appropriate. No disrespect intended. I think you've got to look at, if you want to ask what's the length of this portion, because that's a portion that is recognizable as a structure, that to me is a question that's worth asking. But this, I'm not sure that is a perceptually something that someone's going to experience. They're not going to think about it as one building. I bet if this is constructed and you have, a dozen people walk down the canal and you say, how many buildings did you walk by? I doubt someone's going to say 7. I just don't think they're going to say that.
Admittedly, until they get to the private clubhouse and pool where they think, what is this connected to? Maybe building 1 all the way through building 8.
Yeah.
Right? So there's going to be identity that connects them all.
Right. Totally understood.
Together.
Yeah, my group then.
Could you talk a little bit more just about public access, aside from the sidewalk that circumvents the canal there for a little bit? Can you talk any additional public access or amenities that we should be aware of as we open it up to a public hearing?
Well, certainly people will be able to move between the gaps in these buildings. So when you have a gap between building 1 and building 2, there's the ability to pass through those gaps. I think it's important that, you don't want to be locked into the railroad side or the canal side. Most people will probably stay on the canal side, but if you were parking for some reason on the railroad side, you should be able to cut through the site, just like you cut through any other kind of block in a urban or village setting. So I think, again, that reinforces the idea that this is more of a neighborhood, not just a line of buildings. And the idea that we have foreground portions and background portions, lower portions generally towards the canal and higher portions generally towards the back. Again, trying to create the idea that there's almost a mid-block condition there, that you've got buildings facing 2 different directions, not a single building. So there are those opportunities to move through the site. I think Chris is thinking that the site is essentially unrestricted, right? You have private indoor spaces, but the public space, the outdoor is all public realm. Right.
Where it's been private and closed off forever.
Yeah.
No, that also includes, David, I think it's a good question, in conforming the LWRP document, public benches, public trash receptacles are shown on the site plan.
Yep.
In addition to the interconnected sidewalks that Chris was.
Is any of the parking restricted? Is it for
Well,
some?
certainly the interior parking.
Well,
I don't know about the exterior.
surface-
We haven't thought
surface
about
parking.
restricting it.
Surface parking.
We're trying to keep as much underground parking as possible. The surface parking will, again, be primarily for the residents, but there should be enough for the public also, and enough for the restaurant.
And you probably wouldn't assign those outdoor parking spaces.
No,
right?
no.
So they become unrestricted
Correct.
just by the very nature of the public realm that you've got there.
Just staying on parking for a moment. So of course, public access, aside from, walking and biking, people are going to drive up, right? So then can you talk just a little bit about parking spots versus anticipated residents, and how many parking spots you're adding for either the restaurant or for public access beyond the restaurant?
Those are tough questions.
Yes, they are.
That might take a little.
Okay.
It's submitted on the site plan, so he'll pull that out.
So one of the reasons why I'm asking these questions in the meeting, rather than just reading the site plan, of course, is that these questions are critical, I think, for the public and for us to discuss, and bring them forward in a way that we can be constructive all together, versus just saying, they're embedded. So with that in mind, while we're looking up the parking comments, maybe just talk a little bit about this restaurant, clubhouse, grill, pool hut. I don't know what's going on, because it's kind of changed. I know you have the special permit, so the special permit holds. But could you share with me your intent?
Yeah, the intent is that, where we were there was a separate restaurant building in the front. That building's been removed.
Okay.
And so, in some of our paperwork, we did make a mistake and said the restaurant building was removed, but the restaurant use is still in play. And, again, when it was the regulating plan, it was intended to use that center building that was the clubhouse, and so we're just going to put it back there. So the first floor, what I envision is to have that restaurant use, it's 125 seats, and the outdoor deck. And again, that middle, or the lower level going out to the canal would be what I would see as an amenity space, most likely a fitness center or, meeting spot for the residents. And the pool is intended for the residents. So it's a mix of public and private use, which really goes back to the original approval in the regulating plan.
Staying on the outdoor deck and the restaurant, was that in this building?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so it's in that clubhouse building that's right canal side?
Correct.
Okay, and just reinforce my understanding, the public access walkway would stop where the restaurant and the outdoor decking pool hits the canal and merges into the dock. Meaning to get around, you have to literally go around. There's not a straight thoroughfare down the canal. It's the building, this docking structure. So I'm trying to put it in terms like a place that we know down on in Cornhill. There's the new development in Cornhill with the restaurant. It's a Greek restaurant of some sort now. They've got the outdoor seating, but then there's that little sort of step down slightly, and there's a continuous walkway along the river through that space. As I look at these drawings, that's not quite what I'm seeing. I think I'm seeing a workaround, a pedestrian workaround.
Yeah, let me try and explain it.
Yeah, okay, great, thanks.
I'm going to work this way. So the sidewalk starts in Monroe Avenue, and it is contiguous all the way along the site, and then all the way back out.
Right.
Contiguously. On the canal.
But it breaks from the canal to go around the pool and clubhouse.
To get to the canal, you'd have to go down a series of stairs on this side, and then you would enter, what I would call the public promenade or public dockway. And that's the only way to get to it. It's just so steep to get down. There's two ways to get down to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a break in a way, but it's a dead end too. You go down to the docks and you come back up. There'd be an entrance here. This would be on land, and this would be in the water at a lower level than the upper sidewalk.
Are you doing any embankment modifications in order?
Not in this area. In this area, I think there's an area of a retaining wall.
And share with me in terms of the docks, how does that work with the canal authority? Are they all public use? Are they private use? Do you control boating flow? How does that work?
Yeah, we're just starting up our conversations with the Canal Corporation again. Mm-hmm. Our original conversations a few years ago was that, again, this is public and private. It's open to the public and open to our residents.
Yeah, Dave, how that works is, so the Canal Corporation they don't dictate whether the docking is available to the public or private. That's up to the licensee.
Right.
Pittsburgh Canal side will have to obtain a license from the Canal Corporation, along with a permit to construct the docks. And the canal has very stringent requirements as to the size of the docks, how far they can project out into the navigable waterway. Mm-hmm. They have a distinct dimension, of navigable waterway width that you have to maintain. We went through all of this back in 2012 through 2015, so we have all of that information to the point that the Canal Corporation was actually processing the permit applications at that time. So the design you're showing does conform with all of their criteria. So
I believe what you're saying is the prior site plan approval granted you these authorities that you're now going to the Canal Corps to obtain.
Correct.
So those authorities that the site plan approval granted previously, you know now what they are, right?
Their requirements, you mean?
Sure, whatever was embedded in as conditions of the site plan, you know what they are.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So we've not yet got into site plan comparisons. I know you have a site plan approval, right? As we know with site plan is not LWRP consistency, right? It can be deemed inconsistent even though it's been approved. So I'll ask you separately. What are the conditions in the site plan? And I know we're not there yet, so perhaps you may know. What are the conditions in the site plan for the docking relative to public or private access?
I don't think they're in the site plan, I think they're in the special permit.
Yes.
That says it's public. The
That is
applicant is proposing a publicly accessible dock.
So you're saying tonight that there is no ability for Pittsford Canalside Properties to restrict public access to any dock built?
No, I think I would say it a different way.
How would you
I
say?
think that I would say it's a private dock that I have made commitments to keep it open to the public.
Fair enough. Yep.
And that's
Wonderfully
important,
worded.
that clarification, because that's how the Canal Corporation will look at it. That if you were to call them, they'd say, no, we've issued a private permit to this property owner.
The question, I guess, Chris, to clarify, you've committed to, is that legally binding by the site plan?
He's committed to and is being required to by the special permit.
By the special permit. Very good. Okay,
Yeah.
so appreciate the commitment. Just wanted to make sure it was on paper and not, just.
Dave, Stacy, just a quick question. So if you're up on the sidewalk, if you're up in the neighborhood, you want to go to the dock, you have to walk down steps?
Correct.
Or up from is there any access for wheelchair use?
I think as we.
At the farthest end of it, yeah. Yes.
I'll show you. I think you'd have to come down to here and
Yes.
ramp down this way.
That's correct.
As opposed to going down these stairs.
Yeah.
Along those lines, share with me why, as you're walking along the canal on the sidewalk, all of a sudden you start elevating from the canal, and then you have to go back down to it, because I don't know of that anywhere else on the canal.
I think the simple answer is it's a steep grade.
Yeah, it's the difference between the water elevation of the canal and the site itself.
Okay.
And think about the site as if you start at the railroad, which is obviously a fixed elevation, and as you come across the site towards the canal, we have the garages, we have the village street design, so we can't really lose anything vertical over there, nominal. Then we have the tree lawn area, then the buildings. The buildings have a consistent grade. They lose some grade from railroad side to canal side. Then once we hit that streetscape again, that's relatively level. So my point being is, once you start at the railroad and you get to that sidewalk that's on the canal side of the public street, you don't have a lot of opportunity to lose vertical grade. But the fact of the matter is, the canal water level, and we've all seen it, is how far below that is from the embankment. And we've got to get access down to the docks, obviously. So that's the differential, and of why that you've got those two levels. And the other driving factor of that is the street itself is very clearly identified within the R5 district as to what that street section is to be, that streetscape, as in sidewalks on both sides, parallel parking, car parking, tree lawn area. So there was the R5 requirements requires that sidewalk along the street there. They want sidewalks on the building side and also on the canal side, because that's public ground. And then we just have to navigate them. Okay, we've got a sidewalk at street level, but we've got a canal that's.
I would only suggest to you that as you think about the LWRP, there may be priority to where the sidewalk is, right? Canal side versus street side. And in that, we are going to be the same board that does site plan review. Consideration to those different decisions and viewpoints may be taken into consideration, right? So just ponder that difference for a moment.
I mean, it is interesting to think about other portions of the south side of the canal and the village that also have steeper grades, you know what I'm saying? As you move along that side versus the Shane Place side, there's definitely differences that you can respect that exist on these other sites as well. Behind the library as an example, or as you move past the park that's near the bridge out here that's closed, the grades are much more, well, there's a greater differential there than there is on the other side.
So I'm going to stop for just a minute. I did the great discourtesy of relieving myself before anybody else had a chance to without taking a break. So it is 9:15, and Stacy, appreciate it.
Oh, I just need to stay.
Oh, well, maybe a number of us do. Yeah. So if we could, maybe, is it all right for everybody? We take, 5 minutes, 10 minutes? What's best?
5 minutes.
5 minutes? 5 minutes? And unless there's a line at the bathroom, we'll reconvene at 20 past? Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Kristen. So we are back, and I'll call to order if I could, please. All right, thank you. So before we get going, I just wanted to say that we are in the middle of hearing from the applicant and asking some follow-up questions before we proceed to a public hearing. It is about 9:30 at night. I believe this board probably has enough questions to keep this dialogue going to make sure we fully understand the application as proposed before we proceed with a public, before we proceed with the public hearing. The question that I have is, should we open the public hearing tonight out of courtesy to those who may be hanging on the line and keep it open until the next meeting for those who might want to come back to it and revisit it a week from now, or as soon as we can publicly notice a second meeting?
That'd be fine, yes. I mean, because there may be people who
Waited.
waited, right.
The other part to that is while we may have lots of follow-up questions, we're going to have plenty of time after the public hearing to ask very similar questions or different questions based on the public comment. So I think if it's okay, maybe we spend the next half hour or 3 minutes, don't know, hearing from the public to the extent that anybody may be online and like to offer comment.
There's not many people on. No one's raising a hand and no one has asked anything, so.
We've had no.
No, we've had dialogue with members of the public, but it's more on what we're sharing and screenshots and different things.
Maybe
Could you guys open the public hearing, maybe if you guys don't object, and then continue it?
Yes.
David, so if it's okay with you, I just let Sue Eileen know that they should go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. So I guess then, if I could, I'll make a motion to open the public hearing for 75 Monroe as proposed.
Second.
Roll call. Member Loda?
Aye.
Member Shannon?
Aye.
Member Hoppen?
Abstain.
Chair Marshall?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. So with the public hearing open, I've received, or we've received, here everybody did receive a copy of some comments. I regrettably don't know who they're from, or did I miss it?
We have the same, I think we have the same thing, and our recommendation is to pass these out to the board, because they're quite substantial. It's more than we're comfortable reading, because it's single-spaced. My long reading skills are challenged when you get this long, and it's 5 pages. So I would suggest that the board take it into consideration. We'll give a copy to the applicant, and we'll post it along with the minutes from the meeting.
That sounds perfectly reasonable. I might just hit a bullet point of each one. I haven't read it yet, but I think it might be helpful as part of the public hearing to at least offer the one person.
Thank you so much.
So the one submission, I suppose, will get more time and attention than anyone else. But again, these public comments are not necessarily ones that we need to respond or report to, either at a board level or from an applicant level, as much as it is taken into consideration, but they may give rise to questions or comments that at a board level we may have later. So in brief, according to, and do we know again who submitted this?
It's anonymous.
An anonymous submission.
Wow.
How do I proceed?
Take it for what it's worth.
Okay, we have an anonymous. We have an anonymous submission that what's that? Yeah. So item 1 simply references the proposal does not comply with the village comprehensive plan. At this time, we're reviewing the LWRP. To the extent that the LWRP takes it into consideration, we'll talk about it during our findings. The buildings continue to be larger than any other buildings in the village. We've referenced some of the building sizing and scaling here in this meeting already from the applicant's conversation. It goes on to say the village has few 3-story buildings, the Pittsburgh Flour Mill being the most prominent. It's about 120 feet long and 40 feet deep. Buildings in this proposal are much larger than anything in the village canal front. The APRB talked about this in their 2014 denial of the project. They cited the Secretary of Interior standards for compatible development. Mass and scale should not be more than 10% larger than existing buildings. Item 3 for this public comment, the development patterns differ from historic patterns in the village. Shane Place has development with large buildings in the center surrounded by small buildings in the perimeter. It's not a uniform wall of 3-story buildings. Putting the largest building in the center and surrounding it with small buildings makes sense for this site. The Monroe Ave end of the site is prominently visible from the street, and the other end of the site is prominently visible from Sutherland High School, Sutherland Street, and the athletic fields. Persistent efforts to place large buildings at the rear of the site will impair view sheds of the canal from Sutherland High. The center of the site is the least impactful to view sheds from the south. In the village, a typical pattern of development is to decrease the area of the building as its height increases. Look at the grain silo, which is very tall and very narrow. At Shane Place, the buildings with the largest footprint are short. Tall buildings are narrow with a smaller footprint. The density of development is too high, as stated as far back in 2011 by planner Doug Fox in his report to the trustees. Towns and villages in Monroe County support multifamily density of up to 12 to 15 units per acre, about 89 to 111 apartments for the site. We believe density higher than this is incompatible with LWRP and comprehensive plans. Admittedly, I've not read that report. Any plans for this site should start with a maximum density of 12 to 15 units per acre, and it goes on to talk about building density. Again, these will be available. So you reference that they'll be available in the minutes.
We'll attach them to the end of the minutes. We can also post them.
We can talk about in that there's very few public comments at the present time. Is it appropriate to consider them as attached to the agendas as well?
I can attach it to the meeting packet.
I think they should be attached to the meeting.
That's what I'm thinking, because especially when there's so few and it's not so voluminous, and if it is voluminous, we can have a separate attachment specific to public comment. Okay. Landscaping is lacking. It goes on to talk a little bit about SHPO, and we haven't even talked about landscaping, so I'm going to maybe set that aside and we can spend a little time on that. The village LWRP talks about the importance of landscaping for screening, and landscaping needs to be carefully planned instead of being an afterthought. Landscaping is a complete afterthought in this proposal. It is designed to maximize building area, parking area, access roads, etc. Village landscaping code has many additional requirements. 3-story buildings trigger new requirements in fire code that are problematic for this site. This includes wider streets. If I may just pause there and ask, is that a true statement from those who understand fire code?
So it's generally true, I suppose. If the building is over 30 feet high, then you're supposed to provide space for aerial apparatus, firefighting equipment. So they would need to be able to bring a truck out there that can use a ladder or whatever that does whatever it does. So,
but again, we went through all that when we got the final site plan approval, and the roads.
Yeah, they meet the requirements.
Of the fire truck, so.
And I
whoever
suspect
this anonymous person is just cherry picking things.
And in general, the fire department might not be happy with roads that were narrower anyway. You know what I'm saying? The requirement exists for the 30 feet and higher building, but it doesn't necessarily mean they would waive it for the smaller building. I just don't know.
Do you remember at all, I suspect the fire access is more from the back railroad side than the front, though you also need the front side too, right? You need both sides?
We don't need both sides.
Okay.
So which side?
But you've got to be able to, but the truck, so maybe, again.
Hang on, let Peter.
Yeah, so the code requires that a fire lane is provided along one entire side of a building. Okay? The fire marshal has reviewed the plan and has issued that, has determined that it was compliant, and that was part of the 2014 site plan approval. The fire lane requirement is that if you go over 30 feet, fire access has to be provided for the aerial truck. The fire lane has to be a minimum of 15 feet away from the building, but no greater than 50 feet away from the building. Okay?
Do you satisfy that on the back side?
Yes, this layout satisfies that, because believe it or not, there was conversations, you go back in a minute, of concern over the street trees, that those species were specifically identified so that their height would not be so great to restrict aerial apparatus access.
So the reason I ask, I know that the fire code and these comments were mostly handled within the site plan. And again, I just want to reiterate, you have a site plan approved. With regards to the LWRP, a lot of the things that we'll get into in our discussion will be about green space and, accessibility and continuous canal side frontage and things like that. And the degree by which the infrastructure relative to height potentially impairs that is at least helpful for us to understand why you may be, what limiting factors you may have, right, to accomplish some goals of the LWRP, because no matter what the findings, whether or not it's deemed consistent or inconsistent, if it is deemed inconsistent, we have to understand what resolutions there may be. And with regards to any 3-story building, there may not be a resolution with regards to stealing from the road because of the fire. So.
The only other thing I think that maybe should be pointed out, in addition to what Peter said, is that the fire department access needs that road along one continuous side, but the truck also needs to be able to get out of the site. So they won't accept a dead end essentially longer than like 150 feet. So the secondary road or the road on the other side presumably is their way to turn around essentially, otherwise.
This is all based on the long trucks, right? On the long.
The aerial truck, yeah.
Right.
We had to provide the information to show that truck can circulate through the site. You are correct, the fire lane access is on the railroad side. If you look even in greater detail, you'll see where that road widens for 50-foot segments. That's where the hydrants are located, because that is where the apparatus will set up. They have dimensional requirements there. That's why those bump outs are provided, so that they can put the riggers out and still have one-way traffic. So that, like you said, we'll get into that in site plan, but that's how all of that is done.
Okay, great. So this talks a little bit about access to the site being inadequate, traffic studies. Admittingly, I'm going to move on from that at this time simply because it's not applicable as much to the LWRP. Seeker's already been deemed neg deck, and site plan's approved, so.
Let's get used to these.
Yeah, access to site is dangerous, got to skip for LWRP. Functional traffic calming is needed. Again, that's speed of traffic on Monroe. This is not LWRP. Utilities are inadequate, that's site plan. Does the proposal comply with an approved regulating plan? That's in quotes with a question mark, and I'm going to put my answer in quotes with a question mark. I don't know. Roads, building locations, building quantity, footprint, all that stuff, current site plan. What I do know is that PYLN has not done their work or completed their work with regards to the site plan comparisons of 2014 to this submitted application. That's later.
Can you authorize them to start it now so we can get it?
We passed a resolution doing it earlier.
Yeah.
Yep, that's been done.
Okay, so that was a comment that'll be attached, and we'll go from there. I suspect there's nobody else online at the present time.
Oh,
Well, they're
Well, they're
online.
online, but they
Oh,
don't
they're-
have their hand raised.
Everybody's just going to watch it on YouTube on a Sunday afternoon. Yeah. Okay. Moving forward. I'm going to pause just a minute and look around the room and let anybody else chime in with ideas, comments that they'd like to hear from the applicant on, or questions. And again, this isn't the findings portion, so we're not deliberating the findings. We're just simply gathering the information necessary to deliberate the findings. All right, I suppose I'll keep going. So this goes to the 239M, just a couple points of clarity. The Erie Canal was nominated by NPS in 2014, and the village was designated as a National Historic Site. In that referral, they do say care should be exercised to ensure that this local historic resource is not adversely impacted by the proposal. They go on to say as well that New York State DEC and USGS reflect a stream on the property. You mentioned that you think the stream on the property is the canal itself.
Yes.
It's a big stream. Would it be, and so that's your opinion, professional opinion as the engineer, that that is what it is. There's nothing else coming down that I should know?
And that determination has already been rendered by the DEC and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
That it is in fact a canal?
Yes, that is
Okay,
the regulated water body.
And then going on then one step further, according to National Wetland Inventory prepared by the U.S. Department of Interior, the site appears to contain, it's a canal.
Yes.
Wow, it appears to contain a portion of federal wetland, L1 UBXHX. Is that also the canal?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And that's just the federal nomenclature that they use.
Stacy has a question.
A few years ago, I remember them talking about, wasn't there some waterway that came off from behind office buildings?
Yes.
That's something.
Well, no, but it's actually a pertinent question because it answers the previous question as to the designation that the DEC and the Corps made, because you're correct about the drainage issue that came from the village being office park. The applicant in turn, at the request of the village at that time, piped that. They installed a storm sewer through our property to convey the water from Village Green to the canal. And in doing so, they had to obtain a permit from the DEC and the Corps of Engineers to construct that storm sewer discharge, because that was the regulated water body. So that's how we have the confirmation to answer all of the 239M questions.
Okay, and just to read some definitions in the record in case somebody happens to look at the 239M, that funky code that I just gave you, okay? It reads out as it's a body of water from a littoral boundary and includes all deep water habitats. Goes on to say it includes all wetlands and deep water habitats, 25% cover small particles. And the subclass, this one's great. Permanently flooded, water covers the land surface throughout all years in all years, or throughout the year in all years. Special modifier, it's excavated, lies within a basin or channel that has been dug, gouged, blasted, or suctioned through artificial means by man.
I need a canal.
It's not a wetland.
Right.
Yeah. But the public deserves to know it's not a wetland, right? We're not, yeah. Okay, good. All right, I did. All right, here's a big one. Size and scale. Mass, identity. Could you share your perspective on why you don't think this development would create a unique character in and of itself, separate and distinct from the village of Pittsburgh as a historic village?
I'll try it, sure. I mean, the scale of the parts and pieces, the fabric that we're developing is consistent with what we see in the village. Even, the letter that you were just looking at, we referenced the 120-foot long Pittsford flour mill. So that building in and of itself is 120 feet long. Durkin said that our groups of buildings may end up being 174 feet long. But that's a group of buildings, not unlike you might find either in the buildings across the street from the flour mill or on Main Street. And I think the variety that we're creating and the kind of scale that we have between the canal side and the railroad side, I think it's a scale and texture it's consistent with the village, and the vocabulary is also. So I think we can meet that standard. I mean, it's a different site. It's not going to look like any exact copy of anything in the village, but that's okay. I think it's still part of the character.
You have characterized it as you've compared it to a streetscape.
I mean, yeah, maybe I should use the word canalscape, but there's a street there too on the railroad side. I think it's,
I thought that was actually accurate.
Yeah.
But so if you could compare it with the Lions photograph that you've referenced,
right,
and the
when you look at others,
and the rest of the canal commercial.
When you look at that kind of canal commercial vernacular in some of these other small towns, some of which, like Lions and others, much of which has been torn down in some cases, because even in Seneca Falls, had a series of buildings right along the water. There's an old historic mill there that we've been working on. And there were a series of other buildings attached there right on the canal that have all been taken down because they were in disrepair and, for one reason or another. But I think that commercial character along the canal definitely is what we're trying to emulate. And I think the village has that. It doesn't have, maybe as many contiguous buildings on the canal, but it has that overall infrastructure along the canal. I mean, the biggest distinction in my mind between, one of the other big distinctions between what we're doing and what exists at Shane Place is we have a lot less paved area because we're trying to create some green space. But I think that open space doesn't really change the general character of the place. I mean, it maybe will improve it a little bit in some respects. I don't think Shane Place is inhospitable because of the amount of paved surfaces, but certainly there isn't very much green space there. Whether it's a streetscape or canalscape, I mean, these two things are not exactly interchangeable, but I think there's characteristics of both that we're kind of using to create this area.
If I can add, in addition to a professional architect's opinion, I'll refer you to the HPB's letter from November 10th, where they voted on a number of things in support of the current project, and added that the current plans propose an architectural style which reflects elements from Main Street, Shane Place, and private residences in the village, along with the actual 35% reduction in mass and scale. The architectural style proposed by these plans assists in further reducing the perceived mass and scale of this project. So you have one group whose job it is to look at architecture, and they think that the mass and scale is appropriate.
I believe they said it helps in further reducing the mass and scale. It doesn't say the mass and scale.
I'll just refer you to the letter. Whatever it says, but I think it's a group that's involved, heavily involved. This is their opinion.
Absolutely.
Okay. Secondarily, you may have received a letter from Roger Brown, who is an architect who actually designed the original village master plan. In addition to a number of things, if it's not in the record, I'll make sure it's in the record. But his reaction is, my reaction to all that I've reviewed, and reviewed all the projects, is an extremely enthusiastic one. And this project, and if this project were to be built as envisioned, it would be a huge positive contribution, not only to the village, but also to the Erie Canal system. The changes that have been made from past designs, flat roofs, 2, 3, and 4-story lower building heights, building and architectural variety while keeping with past building detail, window pattern, color, and material variety, the pedestrian-focused public realm site plan, and adding such enhancements as roof terraces, resident gardens, facade variety, historic scale are handsome and enriching. So again, this is a professional who was involved in the project originally for the village, then involved for us. And his resume is extensive with regard to, currently continuing to work on canal projects. So I think his opinion goes a long way with regard to answering that question also.
And what's the date of that letter, please?
This is February 20th, and I'll make sure that.
It is not currently working for.
He's not currently working.
On any structures.
And that's 22?
Yes.
22 of this year, okay, thank you.
This is a little bit off the, did you have a follow-up? No. So a little bit off, but I think applicable. Do you know of any other developments of this size and scale and relative harmony within itself that exists along the canal today?
I'm not aware, maybe we can research it.
Yeah, we have to look. Are you talking about newer developments that were done in as a single project, as opposed to?
Something comparable.
Something comparable, or something even comparable to 2/3, right, of the project.
You're talking about size or style, like Cornhill Landing, is that?
Yeah, so that's, Cornhill Landing would potentially be, but I think that's maybe only the extent of one build, maybe 1.5 buildings.
No, it's comparable in size.
Cornhill Landing?
It's approximately 7 acres.
Cornhill
Similar
Landing.
Z-shaped lot, really.
Right.
Yeah, okay, so this is a good, okay, perfect. So this is just a good, better understanding of where we're at today. When you're coming down Exchange and you go under the bridge, and a lot of people who may listen to this never, when you're going under the bridge, on the left side, the buildings start, and then they continue on through that space until they end. How long is that?
I don't want to give you a wrong number, but I can get back to you on that.
Yeah. What would you guess, 250?
I think it's larger than that, but I'll let you know.
Yeah, it's a lot longer. I mean, I guess it depends on if you measure the courtyard and the building.
That site was a little deeper, as you can tell.
Right.
There's 2 layers of building and a courtyard in the middle, so it's a little more condensed. There's 127 units, so the project's a little smaller.
Yep, and in the city, so, the surrounding, vistas are a little different in terms of what you're anticipating and expecting, right?
There's a large commercial interior, mixed-use component.
But it may be interesting to know if that development is as close as we can get to similarity of, consistency of design.
Yeah.
My hope would be that there's something else.
Yeah, that project would be, I think, if you juxtapose it to the scale of Cornhill Landing will appear to be much larger.
This project.
This project will appear much smaller.
Smaller.
Well, if you think about Cornhill Landing, there's so much expanse of the view shed. Like here, we have a little spit of land in the village.
Well,
I think brings down what we would imagine the size.
And the commercial space on the ground floor is very tall. The roofs on that building are huge, really huge.
And we're just talking about the east side of.
No, I understand. But
so it's commercial and then 4 stories.
It's a, plus a large roof. I mean, the volume of the structures there is totally different scale than.
Right.
And it's all one design.
And the consistency, exactly right, Chris. The overall consistency of the structure as it moves from one side to the other is pretty uniform.
It would, so let's drop that then.
Okay, but I think your question is a good one. I mean, can we show you other developments that are of this scale along the canal or a walkway like this? I think we could. I mean,
but we need to, again, find projects that are under development within an R5 district. This R5 district sets the parameters for a lot of this stuff.
So again, I'll just go back to the R5 code, whether or not it had a line in there that said this satisfies or doesn't satisfy the LWRP. The LWRP is an existing independent freestanding document that no matter what the R5 says you can do, the LWRP is going to have its own perspective on projects, just like the certificate of appropriateness from the HPV, and that's where we are with regards to courtrooms as well. So let's just try to think on this LWRP. How can we get this project moving forward, right? That's what we want. That's what we
I
all
answer
want.
your question about finding similar projects. I think we're going to start looking for those tomorrow. But I think it's unlikely to find similar because the lots like this alongside the canal were generally contaminated. These were canal commercial, they were industrial. You'd have to have a developer who has the experience and ability to put $6 million and move 62,000 or 6,200 dump trucks worth of contaminated soil.
And admittedly,
You're gonna find a ton of these.
I'll add to that to get to the point where we are today, where I think we have some very attractive buildings in their design. And so the question again is, and we hear it occasionally in the community or from other individuals who are, that we're not trying to move forward, and I'll tell you we are, right? We absolutely are.
We are what?
Trying to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I think we may not find, Chris, to your point, we may not find developments of this scale, but I think we will find built form or formally existing forms on the canal of this scale, right? They may not have been built by a single developer, but they produced a streetscape or a canalscape or a texture or whatever you want to call it that are going to be in scale with this. I think we can find.
What's the root of your question? I haven't heard the question yet.
Yeah, okay,
So let's say that there is a project similar size
Right.
and scale,
So here's,
or there isn't.
yeah, so the question, I suppose the right question is trying to find solutions. We haven't gone through the findings. One of the findings is obviously, and it's embedded in the document quite directly, mass scale, separate identity versus uniform identity, contiguous, sort of buildings and designs that are free-flowing over time versus all at once, right? There's lots, starting in December or whenever it was, we had our first LWRP conversation, that design charrette, concept review. I was quoting a lot of those stuff then. I'm not going to re-quote it right now. Maybe we will when we get into our findings. But the idea being that to what degree does size, scale, the relative harmony, as much as we do break it up, things like the clubhouse, for example, when the community is working their way around it, it creates uniformity in design and style that is going to be felt by the community, that may or may not need to be as such. But is that only because of size and scale? Is it only because, as we talked about in December and January, building 7, for example? To what degree, again, this is why I'm looking for having these comments about the persistency or the harmony between the existing buildings and the structures. Is there anything else like it? Can we have a reference point? Can we see, can I drive to that community and see what it looks like, right? And if the answer is no, then we have to, in essence, this document is protecting the village for it to obtain what it wants by what it said it wants within it, right? Yes, there's other codes, right? There's other issues, but each of these policies offers the village the insulation from developments that aren't congruent in design styles and practices in terms of what they want along the canal frontage. You wouldn't have the same argument if you're outside the LWRP, but the LWRP is that protected zone, right? And so that's the standard by which our board is required to judge the project. No matter how much we may or may not, like the buildings, the designs, we have to be very careful, right? And err not on the side of you err on the side, I would think, of the resident, of what they've said they wanted. And so I just want to try to expand my mind to understand how this mass and scale works, right? And so that's why I'm asking these questions.
I think we can provide you some examples.
So we're nearly at 10. We've got an open public hearing. We've got an open public comment period. We've got a couple things that we're hoping to obtain from you guys. It would be my hope that we can include these drawings in the next public notice, right? Include these as well. So these are the renderings of the garage, the clubhouse. Do you have the ability to easily create and blow up a single page dedicated to just the public amenities around the canal and that walkway and that interface, beyond just this? Like what in?
You just, the sidewalk?
Yeah, I mean, you could just take the site, take the site plan, blow it up a little bit and just say, this is the public access to the canal along, so the public can maybe better see that better and more.
Yes.
We didn't quite get into every question that I had before we go into our findings, but I think we got pretty close. But I think the next meeting, we're just going to start right out with this. There'll be nothing else on the agenda, if that's okay. I suspect it will be. And we should do it as soon as we can. Does everybody agree with that?
On board, yeah.
Yeah, do you mind pulling our calendars out and see if we can find a date?
Oh, definitely,
Yeah,
definitely.
why don't we do that?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, let's get it on. So you guys agree to extend the LWRP review to our next session?
Yeah, can
Possibly.
you also confirm that the application is complete?
You already did that.
I did that with the resolution in the beginning. Yep. So we have a complete
What
application.
are the posting requirements?
Meeting requires 3 days posting notice,
Oh, so we could have it.
Wow.
in a
but we
week.
might, well,
Saturday?
okay, I'm gonna hold that. If the room is available, is the other,
We could keep going with Wednesdays.
Yeah.
well, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't do next Wednesday.
Tuesday.
Not at this time, maybe a little later.
Tuesday the 7th.
Well, I'm gonna,
As I'll say to my son, it's only a baseball game.
No, it's not.
Well, for you, it's not. When's yours coming up?
Well, tomorrow. It's supposed to be tonight.
Yeah, you have an important
Rain.
one. I just
Yeah,
have
it's a
Little
big
League.
one. A big one.
Yeah, where if my son walks, that's a big game.
Yeah,
I mean, I can start at 7.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
yeah. Fun night last night.
He's pitching too.
Thomas.
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
So where were we?
Tuesday available?
Tuesday, the 7th?
What time?
I don't mind 6 or 6:30?
6:30.
6:30?
Yeah.
The sooner we move this
I know,
forward,
I
right?
know.
7th is available.
7? 6:30?
That works for me. This is Tuesday.
6:30, Stacy?
So we both,
Correct. So this is a great question.
if you're up and ready, go ahead.
I think, I'll have a little more time to
Yeah?
get
Okay.
there, I
So
think.
Stacy, you're always welcome to join us and chime in.
Yeah.
We welcome your comments through and through, but you would not have any voting capacity should you join us, but we'd love to have you. Yep. Mindy, good for you?
Good for me?
Gentlemen?
Thank you.
7, 6:30?
Yeah, do 6 more.
Publicly notice it, we'll get it done.
Is it okay if you bring these examples to the meeting? I mean, as opposed to in advance, maybe.
Yeah, that would be great if.
I mean, we have them, I guess.
If
we'll
you
try and-
have them, you can send them, but if you bring them to the meeting, I think that's probably sufficient, right? We'll be, yeah, the public hearing's open. What I would love, though, if there's any one thing that I would really love for you to do, would be leave your big boards.
Yeah, we'll leave this.
Those are Ty Lynn's.
Yeah, these are
Oh, yeah.
ours.
We have.
We've had them up.
Yeah.
I haven't been in Village Hall this
Yeah.
week, so. Yeah, if we could just leave them up, maybe in the back, I think it'd be nice for people coming in, or even in the front foyer in case they redirect.
Sure.
Can those be sent to me in a digital copy?
The club.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's June 7th at 6:30.
6:30, yep. Right. Okay. Just to reiterate, public hearing's open, public comment period's open. At this point, I believe, without further ado, just motion to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call, Member Loda,
Yes.
Member Shannon,
Yes.
Member Hobbit,
Yes.
Chair Marshall,
Aye.
motion carries.
Thank you for
Good night,
seeing us.
everyone.
Yeah,
Thank you, gentlemen. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it, everybody.